Y'all, and welcome to our TREC Commission meeting. Before we go into the pledges, I would like to everybody take a moment of silence for the people in Dayton, in my hometown of El Paso. It's a very tragic thing, not only with the victims lost, but people working in restaurants that have been closed for a week and just dealing with it. And I'd just like a moment of silence for everybody there, if I could, please. Thank y'all. Agenda item number 1. Commissioner Miller, will you lead us in the pledges, please? Formally call the meeting to order. I would seek a motion for excused absences for Barbara Russell and Rayito Stevens.
So moved.
Motion and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Just want to clarify on the absences. Just kind of a heads up. If you're going to be absent, we expect to know prior to the meeting starting, then we will seek an excused absence. Otherwise, it is hard for us to seek an excused absence, not knowing whether you're going to be here or not. So thank y'all for that. Is Brad Phillips here by any chance? Okay. Brad Phillips is from Temple, Texas. He served on the Texas Real Estate Inspector Committee for 12 years, including 2 years as chairman. And we have this certificate that says, in recognition of dedicated service to the citizens of Texas as a member of the Texas Real Estate Inspector Committee, February 2007 through January of 2019, signed by Doug O. Mixon and myself. And we will see that Brad gets this. If you know Brad, thank him for his service to the Inspector Committee and, like this said, the state of Texas. So if y'all see him, tell him congratulations. Agenda item number 4, we will start with the staff reports. And Executive Director Doug O. Mixon, you're up.
Is this on? Oh, there we go. Perfect. Well, good morning and welcome to your regular quarterly meeting. We have had an enormously busy summer. And we are looking forward to sharing our trip to Arello in September with our new chair and several of the commissioners for Commissioner College. We're making, your staff continues to make major progress on all fronts. This is the season of budgets. That's the one thing the legislature has to do every 2 years, and one thing we have to do every August is adopt a budget. And so we have a very full agenda with lots to do to implement the policies given to us by the legislature through the sunset process. Remember that this meeting is being live streamed, and so be careful with your microphones. They're very sensitive. And we're always looking for ways to streamline our reports to you, so let me lead by example. Unless you have questions for me, I'm going to turn this over to our directors for their reports and reserve a little time at the end for some additional business.
Okay. Tony Slagle, Deputy Executive Director.
Good morning, Commissioners. Tony Slagle, Deputy Executive Director. I am reporting on the customer service issues and an update on how we're doing. I'm mainly up here to answer any questions, but I did want to focus on a couple of things. I sent out an email at the beginning of the month, as I do every month, with updates on how we're doing. Just to focus on a couple of highlights of that. It's the second month in a row we were able to sustain a hold time of less than 3 minutes. But the good thing about sustaining that was we handled an additional 1,800 calls for that month. So even though the hold time was the same, the increased call volume was 1,800 more. I did want to focus or say one thing of interest that I thought the commission would be interested to hear. So far for the month of August, we've handled roughly 5,000 calls with an average monthly hold time of under a minute. So, yeah, so it's great. Thank you. Thank the staff for their hard work, and it takes a team, and everyone's working very hard to make sure we do this. With pulling those numbers towards the end of the month, if everything maintains, we'll handle roughly 16,000 calls. You never know, it could be more than that, but roughly 16,000 calls for the month of August. There's a couple of things that we're continuing to do to help that even more. By the end of the month, we should have a much better system in place for license holders to retrieve their passwords. And why that's important is a lot of license holders don't sign on to the system except for when they're renewing. So it's every 2 years. By that time, they may have forgotten what their password is. The current system is, to use a technical term, a bit wonky. And it from time to time, depending on the time of the month, if it's when we're doing renewals or we're doing other things, we can get up to 20% of our calls on a day based on people trying to figure out how to reset their password. So once this is in place, it'll be significantly easier, and it should reduce the need to zero. People will still call, but it should, in the long term, reduce the need to zero to have to call the agency to get your password reset. So that'll be towards the end of the month. I just wanted to focus a couple of things on licensing. We'll be posting for 2 additional people for licensing in the next couple of weeks to help with the processing. We're still working on trying to get the document upload in place. It's a little more complicated than we thought it was going to be, but there are some IT reporting that's been done over the last week that we've determined that will help the licensing director get some numbers to better manage the process of managing her staff and hopefully get the processing time down even sooner. So I'm happy to answer any questions you have. If not, I will pass it on to the next person.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Robert Hood, Reception and Communication Services Director.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. My name is Robert Hood, Director of the Reception and Communication Services Division. Before I start on my report on the progress of RCS, I would like to introduce Danica Denali. Danica joined the agency in June and has already made a huge impact to the level of customer service that we provide. We are proud to have Danica as part of our RCS family. Now for the RCS report. Over the past 3 months, RCS has focused on reducing our hold times. 18 RCS employees are handling calls now, and last month, our average hold time was 2 minutes and 44 seconds. On the first chart of the report, you will see that 16,196 calls were presented and 15,007 were handled with less than a 7% abandoned call rate. The next graph on the RCS report indicates the comparison of calls presented, handled, and abandoned. Notice the number of abandoned calls are continuing to decrease over this fiscal year. As mentioned, we continue to focus on our hold times, and the last graph depicts the improvements to hold times over the past fiscal year. June, 2 minutes and 44 seconds, and July was 2 minutes and 51 seconds, and as Tony mentioned earlier, we're about less than a minute for our August hold time so far. Page 2 of the report indicates the consistent number of walk-ins and email customers we've handled. We're making strides to maintain our promise of responding to emails within 2 business days. In fact, the majority of our emails, or about 80%, are responded to within 1 business day. The last chart on this page shows the comparison between calls for the TREC and TALCB calls. June was consistent with the previous 3 months, and 92% were calls for TREC related, and 8% were for TALCB related. Lastly, the last page of our report is the customer satisfaction report. The top 2 graphs provide us with a snapshot of how our customers are contacting our office and what industry type they are inquiring about. The last 3 graphs on this page is our report card from customers on their experience with emails, telephone, and customer service representatives that assisted them. The shaded blue area of each graph depicts the percentage of customers that rated us as excellent. The email experience, 64% rated us as excellent. For telephone experience, 90% rated us as excellent. And lastly, our customer service representative, 84% providing a rating of excellent. This completes the report for the Reception and Communication Services Division. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Mr. Hood, first of all, thank you. Your coming to this agency has been instrumental in our ability to address our customer services concerns, and I just want to point that out here in our meeting. You've done an excellent job. Still got work to do, but you're doing great. Thank you.
Thank you to our staff.
I have one question, and it's, you still have a 64% excellent rating from the email folks, but it's noticeably lower than the excellent excellence ratings in the other 2 categories. Did you get any feedback at all as to why?
Well, the number of respondents for that category was, I think, 33 respondents, so it's pretty low compared to the other ones. So I can say that since this report, we've increased our turnaround time on email, so I imagine this the rating will go up.
Okay, great. And then I lied. One more question. When we see how customers contact TREC and the licensing board on that same page, we still have 65% of our customers contacting us via telephone. Is that something that we're working to reduce still, and what are the objectives we have in place to reduce that, to streamline some of this and encourage folks to use our online services, which are only 3% right now?
Yes, as we release more online tools, such as like the password resets, that will reduce the number of people that actually have to contact us, and they'll be able to do all their business online. And we're working on some promotions and online tools that'll help them do their business instead of having to call us.
Would you mind telling me, other than password resets, what categories of services we're trying to roll into online?
We have the application status tracker that we're opening up to more industry types, and then we have our CE credit. They'll be able to go online and see their credit requirements online as well.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yes, I have one.
Commissioner
You
Williams.
contributed, it's an increased satisfaction, that's a good thing. You contributed to better management, systems and process, better people. How are we getting the results, and how do we increase the positive responses?
I think it's a combination of all. We have streamlined a lot of our processes within the contact center. We've hired some more professional staff that are used to handling calls on a daily basis all day long. They have a lot of contact center experience. And then, of course, our hold times is helping out the rating as well.
One more. You think by the reason why we're able to hire better service providers is because we've increased the wage average?
I believe so. Our wages are comparable or a little bit higher than a lot of customer service 3 representatives positions, so that does help get more better applicants.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yes, I have one. Excuse me, Mr. Hood, in the customer demographics, is there any way to tell how many of those calls coming in are from applicants that want their license? So do you separate any of that out?
That's not a number that we track right now. No. We just, we track the number of just agents and just the various different industry types.
Is that something that could be broke down?
Tracking, that's something we can look into, definitely, yes.
Okay. I noticed on the emails from September to June, September 18 to June of 19, the amount of emails have constantly been decreasing substantially under the licensing. Do you think that is the online tracker and this E-class is now being posted on the website?
Definitely, yes. And then also our response time on emails is a lot faster, so there's not a lot of repeated emails. So that's why there is a decline.
In the same period, total emails are down almost 2,000, so you're getting less emails probably because of what's available online? Okay. And I understand we spoke before, you're not quite at capacity as far as staff, but getting close?
We're hiring, we're in the process of hiring 2 additional customer service representatives right now. And then when the agency's completed our renovation, we'll be hiring additional 2 more.
Okay. Any other questions? Yes,
Just a thought.
Commissioner Miller.
If you are looking at, if you're able to separate out how many of those are applicants, and they may all be in the consumer slot at this point, then you could also start looking at how many are the complaints and maybe figure out how many complaints were really, I know you track how many we actually get, but you don't know how they started. Another thought that I had was if we can make more obvious I'm used to the button to file to fill out a survey on customer service was way at the end of everything, and I know that's been moved, but if you could make that more prominent, or I know every place I call now, they ask you first thing when you answer, if you'll stay on the line one more minute, and take that might help. I don't know.
When we first launched the customer satisfaction survey, it was a prominent place on the homepage, and we can add that again. Just so when you go to our homepage, you're able to complete the survey, and then we will work with the Department of Information Resources to see if we can add that to our phone menu as well, so we can complete the survey online.
And could there be a follow-up email 24, 48 hours later asking to fill out a survey? Is that something after the phone call or email or?
We can look into that for sure. Yeah,
Okay.
I like that idea.
Okay. Any other questions? Robert, awesome job. Thank you for moving it forward. That's what we're looking for. So thanks again for all your effort and your team's effort, everybody's effort. All right, thank you. Next up is Denise Sample, Licensing and Registration Services Director.
Good morning, Chair Kestner and Commissioners. I'm Denise Sample, the Licensing and Registration Services Director, and before I start my report, I'd like to begin by introducing the 2 newest members of the licensing team. Christina Vela joined the team in late May. She comes to us from the Texas Department of Motor Vehicles with experience in license application processing. And Yesenia Smith joined the team in June. She comes to us with experience in license application processing and document review at various other state agencies. Please join me in welcoming Christina and Yesenia to the team. So I'd like to start out, or moving on to the L1 report. This is a fiscal year-to-date comparison through June of 2019 of applications received and renewal activity for real estate brokers and sales agents in the top half of the report and real estate inspectors at the bottom half. You'll see that the number of real estate broker and sales agent applications continues to hold steady. The inspector numbers, we've continuously been reporting on the anomaly September of 2018 where we had a dip in number of applications. So when you pull out September numbers, the variance overall in inspector applications received is only down about 10% instead of the 20 that's reflected in the report. Moving on to the L2 report. This is I apologize, yes?
It's down 10% instead of the 20 that's reflected on the report, but is that a trend? Is that something we need to be concerned about?
I'm not really sure how to answer that. I'm anticipating with the streamlining of the inspector requirements, we might see an increase in those. We might see them bounce back.
My concern is seem to be holding pretty steady on the number of inspectors we have, but the new applications seem to be going down pretty dramatically.
Yeah, and fortunately, I don't have any information as to why. There's,
Okay.
yeah, not really prepared to
You see
answer.
that as a trend, though?
I can look at past fiscal years. I don't see that as a trend overall. With the numbers holding steady, the number of applications coming in, that kind of adds to our workload. But as far as how many people get licensed, those numbers don't totally directly relate to one another. So I'm not sure if we were to look more closely at those
Fair
numbers,
enough.
it might reflect a little differently.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I share the same concerns, and I know I've brought this up, not necessarily with, this doesn't necessarily have anything to do with your division, has more to do with licensing requirements, passage rate on our exam, hours required for licensure, which I believe we heard at a previous meeting are twice as much as there are present in most other states. This is something that I'd like to see us address and take a very hard look at. I know we are streamlining requirements, which I think will help. There may be people waiting to apply until those requirements are streamlined. That would be a smart thing to do. I would like, if you don't mind, to see at our next meeting some more long-term data, historical data, because we did see this tremendous upswing in licensing of other real estate professionals. So I'd like to know whether or not and this is, over the past several years when we saw this big boom in applicants for licensors, for brokers and salespeople, if we had a commensurate increase in inspections, because in my opinion, it would follow if there wasn't some barrier to entry that the more transactions you have, the more salespeople you have, but the more people you have wanting to be inspectors as well. So if that's not too much trouble, I'd appreciate a little bit more historical trend data, so I think Commissioner Leonard would
It
too.
would just be a matter of putting it side by side, adding more historical information, a couple more fiscal years as well to compare.
Thank you.
Commissioner, just a reminder that at our workshop in November, per the request of the commissioners, we'll also be doing the year-over-year annual comparison. So we'll just go back and add like 3 or 4 more consecutive years for that particular statistic for you.
Thank you, Mr. Wilmington.
Thanks. So moving on to the L2 report. This is a 13-month comparison of total license holders and registrants, which includes active and inactive status. The bottom right of the report shows the total number of license holders and registrants through the end of June of 2019. We're at 195,851 license holders. The last page of my report is a graphical representation of that information. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any further questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Jennifer Wheeler, Education and Examination Services Director.
Good morning, Chair and Commissioners. I'll follow suit and start with introducing my 2 newest employees. I'm excited to say that adding these 2 new individuals fills our Education and Examination Services team. So at this time, I'd like to introduce you to Michael Hovey. Stand. Michael Hovey is a veteran of the U.S. Air Force, where he was a leader in sectional training and began instructing service members in the early 2000s. In addition to editing incoming and outgoing training records and validating course completion documents, he developed a training course for service members to improve their study skills. In his career, Michael led over 100 military and civilian instructors in performance of their duties. Please help me welcome Michael. And I'd also like to introduce to you Denise Martinez. Denise comes to us with nearly 20 years of state service experience, where she's been required to interpret policies and procedures, including state statutes, rules, regulations. She's also a former TREC sales agent, familiar with the real estate industry and competencies. Denise also spent 10 years in the elementary teaching environment. Please help me welcome Denise. So today, really the only thing I have to report on to you is the development of our new RFP, or request for proposal. This is for a new licensing exam vendor, and it takes place every 6 years at a minimum. We plan to have the RFP made public in mid-October. The exam vendor awarded the contract for administering our licensing exam will begin doing so in September of 2020. This is a big endeavor, and I will report to you with more information at the November meeting. But we do have planned to have the RFP ready for presentation to the public in October. And if there are no questions, that's everything I have for you today.
Any questions? Okay, thank you very much. TREC Standards Enforcement Services Director, who's given.
Mike is doing. Good morning. My name is Mike Malloy. I'm a staff attorney and team leader. Mr. Moore couldn't be here today. His father passed away yesterday, so I'll be giving the reports today. So right here we have the E1 report. This is our case status report. If you've seen this several times.
Excuse me.
I'm sorry.
Commissioners, I would like to give a moment of silence for.
Barkstad.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's bow our heads and give a moment of silence for the gentleman. Thank you. Thank you.
We've had this steady, like we've had for the past couple years, incoming complaints and our background history openings, and we've been closing a lot of complaints and resolving them at the same time. Moving on to the case agent report, there are some good news on the E2 report. For the first time that I can recall, we have 99% of our cases that are less than a year old. Those few there that are actually over 2 years old, they are in either set at SOA or have a PFD. They're holding in there because of the process. It takes time to get through the SOA process and everything like that. And moving on to the subject category complaint, the E3 report. The first page is just gives a pie graph representation of the subject matters. There hasn't really been any big trends that we've seen. We don't use this for day-to-day statistical analysis, but it does give us a snapshot of the overall general amount of complaints that we receive. And then on the second page, that gives you the breakdown of the numbers. So if there's an upswing, usually it's because we closed out a large amount of cases for one person. But statistically, they usually all balance out. And if you have any questions about that report or the other previous two reports, I'm here to answer any of those.
Any questions? So of the 18 that are 12 months or older, you think majority of those are waiting for the SOA hearing?
Those 8 on the
I think it was 18.
6, I believe it was 6.
6 over 18 months.
16.
Six over 18, yeah, 18 to 24 months. Those are all in the SOA process. Yes, sir.
Okay, and the 12 from 12 to 18 months?
So we have a thing where if a case is over a year old, it needs to have a petition and be set at SOA. So those are all in the process as well. These ones that are really old, it's because cases get reset and things do drag out sometimes, unfortunately. So.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, thank you. And thank you for stepping up this morning and giving the report.
Oh, you're welcome.
Steve Rapp, Information and Technology Service Director.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. I'm Tom Watson, Assistant Director of Information Technology. Steve is unable to attend today. He's out of town. Before I get on to the I-1 and I-2 report, I'd like to address two different topics. One is that we've completed an analysis of our help desk staffing. Thank you. We've completed an analysis of our help desk staffing, and as a result of taking a look at the number of calls that we get in and the assistance that we give to the various divisions, we've identified the need for one additional resource. We will be posting that position and hopefully filling that position shortly. The second item is that since your last meeting, we also completed a security assessment with an external vendor. That security assessment came out favorable overall. They did recommend and identify some areas of weakness that we will be taking a look at in further depth and putting together a plan and strategy on how to address those particular issues. We will be going through this particular assessment every year, probably around this time. So it gives us 12 months to address their findings, then they'll come back and do a second review of where we stand versus the statewide standards. So on the I-1 report and the I-2 report, you'll see that those numbers over the last 12 months remain pretty consistent and favorable and strong for both the online utilization of services as well as the website utilization as measured by the number of hits. If there are any questions, I'll be happy to address those at this time.
Any questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
President Vivo with the Staff and Support Services Director.
Good morning. First, before we get started with my reports, I would like to introduce the newest staff member for our division, Maria Lee. Maria comes to us by way of the medical business. She is hired to be our administrative assistant within our division since June 3rd. Most recently, she worked for a medical equipment company. She also worked as an assistant at Seton Healthcare for a number of years. She's got a varied background in video production, PR, university grant coordination. We are really happy to have her on board. She comes with a great skill set and a wonderful attitude. Please help me welcome Maria Lee. And one thing you'll notice, we've got a lot of people that we're hiring, and I think one of the points that's been made earlier is we really are getting good quality people, as you can see from the bios that you're hearing. So I wanted to bring that to your attention as part of staff services. My first report is the budget status report. So you'll notice about this time of year, we're ramping towards the end of the year. We're at 10 months through the fiscal year in June. We expect to have expenditures of about 16.67%, and you'll notice that we have, in fact, a little bit higher than that, 27%, even though we have gone below in some categories and higher in others. So our expenditures continue to be lower than what we'd anticipated on our revenue, about $122,000 more, $130,000 more, so we're a little bit higher in revenue than we had anticipated to be at this time, but we still have the big months at the end of the year. The next three reports that we have are the investment reports, and since we have such a crowded agenda, I won't go over these, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. That's for the operational and recovery funds. I wanted to bring to your attention that you've heard about the hiring and that we haven't hired as many people as we anticipate hiring. And part of the reason for that is because we don't have enough space. So we're in the process of remodeling, and that's one thing that my team has taken on. And you've seen that in the budget in terms of the amount of money that we're expected to expend. So the remodeling, in fact, just started, and it's noisy and disruptive, and we hope that all of our staff will be patient through it. But at the end, we will have more room and have a better footprint to be able to accommodate more people. We've also completed 2 audits during this period, and we'll have a report from our internal auditor on the licensing audit, and I will give you a report later in the period about the state auditor's office. But I wanted to let you know that we have 2 more big projects coming up that I'll be reporting on over the next few months. The first is a post-payment audit, which the comptroller's office does every about 4 to 5 years, and so we're about due for one, so that will come. And we will also be moving on to the CAPS system. We did CAPS HR, which is the software for the state of Texas. Everyone's required to use it at some point. We're starting the accounting end of that, and that's going to be huge for our division. As a result, we actually have a new, we have posted a new position that will be coming on to assist with that, because that will be all of our accounting and purchasing and expenditures and everything will be transferring to a new system, and all of my staff will have to learn something new. So first we did HR, and now we're going to do accounting. It's going to be another big year. And then finally, we had a State Office of Risk Management report that was favorable and gave us a few things we needed to work on. That is another mandatory report that comes out every few years, and they audit our compliance with risk requirements. And that's all for now, unless you have questions for me.
Yes.
Just
Sir.
quickly on the budget report.
Yes, sir.
As you pointed out, we're moving into the last quarter for the year, and I don't know, about a third of the way down the page for registration and memberships. We still have 71% of our budget remaining for that category, and it says unexpended areas of budget for LBJ school directors, ITS training, and staff training.
Right.
Are those trainings and attendance at the school directors things that we plan to occur in this
So some of those things have occurred. A big number of, at the end of the year, training is still going on. For example, I just approved all the requisitions for the CE for the attorneys. Okay. So we have a lot of conferences that come up at the end of the year, and some of them start up at the beginning of the next fiscal year. So I think we're going to see a big jump on that by the end of the year.
Yeah, I just want to make sure those dollars are being spent,
Absolutely.
especially given everything we've been talking about over the last year or two.
Absolutely.
Let's make sure that we're spending the money on our staff training that's available under the budget. So you think that's going to happen?
Yes, sir. We have a training plan now that's in place that our HR manager is working on implementing, so that we are following up on every training that has been planned so that it's actually done.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Before I move to the executive committee report, if there's anybody that would like to make a public comment, the cards are outside where you entered. If you'll fill that out and bring it up, we will get to that agenda item after the reports. Executive committee report is found on page 31 of your packet. Executive committee met June 19th and also July 10th, and those minutes are online if you'd like to look at those. And I will go on to the budget report. Michael, Commissioner Williams.
No, I just want to make sure your microphone was on.
We went to great lengths with the executive team, Doug and his team, to really look at our budgets, and it caused us to have 2 meetings. So I would like for everyone to adopt the motion to pass. We passed it favorably to a reduction total of $152,000 annually. And then the motion was passed unanimously to recommend the 2020 budget draft as presented and approved by this committee. So I'd like to make a motion.
That'll be considered under agenda item 29, which would be the appropriate time for the motion.
Oh,
Commissioner.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, any questions before, and like I say, agenda 29, we will open that back up. All right. Thank you for your report. Enforcement Committee, Commissioner Turner.
So we had a lively quarter in enforcement. We met on several topics, all of them which are listed in your materials. There's one particular change that I would invite any of you to please talk to me individually. We're trying to streamline things in enforcement. And among those items, looking at changes to how motions for rehearing are handled and whether or not we need to have an in-person meeting for each motion for rehearing that we receive after we take action as a commission. Those motions for rehearing are not always accompanied by a request for a hearing by the particular applicant or licensee. So we're still holding hearings. So we're still flying in and having in-person meetings even when the applicant hasn't requested that. That's unusual in my experience. So we're looking at that. We also looked at several rule changes, all of which will come up later in the agenda, as I understand. So, did I miss anything?
Any questions? Chelsea Buchholz, Broker Lawyer Committee.
I will keep this short. The committee met last month. They reviewed comments that were submitted to them and also many of the TREC forms. You will see the recommendations that they are bringing forward to you in your materials, and you will review those later in the agenda today. I believe it's agenda item 38. I did want to mention one thing to you that's not before you today, and that is the changes to the seller's disclosures notice. The Broker Lawyer Committee did review the changes made by the legislature and that are required to be changed in that seller's disclosure notice, and made those changes to mirror what the statute required. So that form is already available on our website, and it can be used today, but it is required to be used by September 1st. So that change is already happening. You approved at the May meeting a change to your policy on what forms you needed to review. And so we used that new form policy to move that form along without it needing to come before you. It was pursuant to a statutory change. So those changes were simply made and put on the website. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Commissioner Miller.
In reviewing all these documents, I was really surprised that you had so few comments. And I kept thinking, who looks at the Texas Register? Really? Scott, do you read the Texas Register?
No, ma'am.
Neither does Jan. Do you? You may. You're a police officer. But if nobody reads it, I think we need to publish things somewhere else too. And I know we depend on TAR to get words out to the general realtor public and real estate public.
Absolutely. So I will speak to that. So the way Broker Lawyer Committee receives comments in a number of different ways. Many of those come simply to the general counsel email address, and they're not based on anything published in the Texas Register, though they can be. They can just be comments of changes anyone would like to see to the forms. So they submit those to TREC, and then we bring those before the Broker Lawyer Committee. The form changes before you today have not gone to the Texas Register. You are considering publication in the Texas Register today, and those changes will also be available on our website for review by the public, and we will receive those comments, take them to the Broker Lawyer Committee, and then also back to you. So, you know, it is a requirement that we publish in the Texas Register, but we also rely upon our own website, which is used more readily. And then also word getting out in various ways. Often there will be somebody posts something on Facebook and word spreads that way, of course. Modern times.
The TREC advisor is really too, I'm sure you put stuff out there.
Yes.
But as long as there's lead time before the broker lawyer meetings so that we can get more comments, I just think that would be better.
It definitely ebbs and flows. There weren't many comments this time. Since these materials have been published, we have been receiving more comments that will go to broker lawyer and then ultimately to you. Anything else?
In follow-up, Commissioner Miller, I had discussed with staff about putting proposed rules on the website when you log in, maybe not the 1-to-4 family. That way if someone accidentally logs in to renew their license, then they'll see the proposed rules there, because I agree, there's a lot of changes that we don't get a lot of comments on.
Right.
So, agree. Thank you. Rob Cook, Education Standards Advisory Committee. I'm sure he's going to use the word lively also.
As always. Good morning, Commissioners, Mr. Executive Director, and Mr. Chairman. Well, we met on July the 8th, and we had actually no changes to our minutes, and we had no public comments, so it was kind of quiet there. We did have discussion of approval of providers of qualifying courses, responsibility and operation of providers of qualifying courses, responsibility and operation of continuing education providers, approval and instruction of qualifying courses, and approval of continuing education instructors. So we had a very lively meeting, and no public comments were received there either. So we've got several items going to be before the commission today, but the first one we have is about the 3 hours. We're also going to have some sort of poll in which we can determine what agents would like to have as far as education. And of course, what you are going to be proposed today are going to be the examinations, definition, qualified education, compliance and enforcement, definition and approval of non-elective continuing courses, which is all part of the Sunset Commissions. So you've got a lot of work to do today. We're going to be talking about polls after the web page is confusing, because I think a lot of people are going to the web page not able to understand it. We're going to be talking about moving subject to probation and in good standing, maybe move it to another page. So we're going to do a mock-up of what the website looks like for the next meeting that we're going to have. So, and of course, Deputy Executive Director Slagle came in and talked about the time frame for getting things approved. So this is his goals, is going to have Real Estate or Inspector C courses, initial review response within 10 days, Real Estate or Inspector C Distance Education initial review within 30 days, Real Estate or Inspector qualifying courses initial review response within 30 days, Real Estate or Inspector qualifying courses initial review response within 45 days. Now he would not guarantee that, but he said that's going to be his goal for that. So, also we had asked from the staff to get something about a checklist. So when people are submitting approval of courses, we know what we need to send in and when we need to send it in. Of course, we did a forum committee talking about, there's a difference between online classes and in-class classes, whereas there's an examination online, and they're talking about, do we make that equal? So we're having a subgroup looking at that. And we're going to be updating that. And let's get to this next one. Also, we did a work group. We've been using the same evaluation form for a very long time, so we're going to look and see if that's kind of outdated now, if we need to revise it. So we have a group put together that. They will report in on our next meeting. And of course, these are the things we're going to be talking about next time. Report from the working group on standardizations, report from the working group on course and structure of the forms, changes to the education provider exam pass rates webpage, changes to provider course applications, updated staff reports including benchmarks for application processing. Of course, we're going to have a review of the continuing education requirements and results of survey that we want to propose. And Mr. Chairman, that's my report. Any questions?
Any questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Lee Warren, Texas Real Estate Inspector Committee.
Good morning, everyone. The Inspector Committee met on July 15th for its quarterly meeting. As you've seen, our agenda, or your agenda this quarter, is also very heavy on the inspection side as it was before. Most of the items that you've seen on your agenda are the same ones that you saw last time. Now that we've gone through the public comment phase, for most of these items, they're being brought before you again for final approval and implementation. One of the exceptions to this, the item regarding the new pre-licensure process, we have completely changed the path to become a licensed inspector in the state of Texas. Based on Sunset Commissions and a number of items that we wanted to change as well, we have come up with a more comprehensive education path to become an inspector. We have reduced the hours required, but we have focused more on the hands-on and practical learning objectives rather than throwing code text at someone and hoping that they can apply that to a home inspection. You saw this last quarter, but we did make some substantive changes to this process. As a result, this is coming back before you for approval again, and we would need to go back through the public comment period before final approval. Biggest change is to allow for the transition time for candidates that are on the current education path and the ones that will start the new one. We don't want to punish those that have started on the current path by making it obsolete prior to them being able to obtain their license. By allowing the extra time for these candidates to complete their path, we feel this is a prudent step to help make the transition to the new process much smoother and fairer to everyone involved, including the education providers. We did receive some public comment on this issue, and after much consideration of those comments received, we believe what is in front of you is the best course of action to move forward with a better educated inspector upon licensure. We've gone through the process for the new standards of practice, legal and ethics required courses for inspectors. We've spent a substantial number of time on these courses to try and ensure that they are not just glazed over by the inspectors that are required to take them. We wanted to try and ensure that it would be a good comprehensive review of the important aspects of our industry and that the importance of having a license holds to protect consumers in the best possible way. Finally, we had an extensive discussion about limits of liability within agreements between inspectors and their clients. We became aware that there were inspectors out there that had agreements with their clients that limited their liability to the cost of the inspection. The issue with this is that it could be in direct conflict with the state statute that requires inspectors to carry liability insurance against violations of subchapter G of the 1102 Occupations Code. There has been a lot of incorrect information that had come out through certain organizations about the intent of the Inspector Committee and the Real Estate Commission on this issue. The main concern from the staff was that they wanted to find a way to help consumers understand their rights as it relates to that state statute. Since it would not be prudent or practical for TREC to be directly involved with the agreement with the inspector and their client, we felt the best way to address this concern was to modify the Consumer Protection Notice to reflect the requirement for an inspector to carry the liability insurance and its purpose. Since a Consumer Protection Notice is required to be posted by inspectors for the consumer to see per rule, we felt this was the most practical way to accomplish this goal. We'll be bringing verbiage to you for approval on the modification to the Consumer Protection Notice at your meeting in November. And to address the other question that you had on that, because I figured that was probably going to come up too. I think there's two big reasons why our application numbers have started to decline. One, yes, I think the fact that it's becoming pretty well known that we're changing the pre-licensure process. So I think a lot of people are kind of holding off on that, mostly because all that they're really seeing is the fact that it's going from 455 hours to 192 hours, and they're going, I think I'm going to hold off on that a little bit. And I think that's a practical step, a reasonable step for them to take. Also, just market trends. You know, I'm going in my 15th year of doing this, and I've seen the ups and downs as we see with the licensee numbers, and that's just kind of the way that goes. We look at our numbers very, very closely every time we have a meeting. We've noticed that there's a lot of inspectors that are retiring. But as the market really starts picking up, you see the numbers crawl up. And now as we're starting to level things off, we're starting to see a pretty good level off in that as well. I think in our industry, it tends to balance itself pretty well. But I think those two things are probably your main contributors as to why those application numbers have declined.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions?
Any other questions? All right, thank you very much. Okay, before we go to agenda item 11 on public comments, I would like to skip over to agenda item number 40 and 41. That is page 449 of your packet if you're keeping score at home. And this is the internal audit presented by McConnell & Jones.
Good morning, Commissioners. For the record, I'm Darlene Brown. I'm the Internal Audit Director, and I work with McConnell & Jones, and we serve your agencies as your internal audit function. So I'm presenting two items for you today. The first one's for information, and we performed a if I can turn your attention to page 452. We perform a diagnostic review of the licensing process to see where some efficiencies and some operational improvements might be gained. And we focused on the workflow and how you track the license applications from the time they come in to the time that the license is actually issued. We looked at the reports that are being provided out of the systems and the information provided to you. We also looked at what is it that your licensing system can actually do versus what your needs are. And then we also looked at the resource allocation within the division itself to make sure you have enough FTEs. Our overall conclusion was that there's processes in place to make sure that every license that is issued from your agency complies with statutory requirements and that the license holder actually meets all of the requirements. However, we did come up with 18 suggestions for improvement. And so I've summarized those into a couple bullet points, but all the detail, each recommendation is listed in sort of a project plan so the agency has a direction and a path to move forward. And our understanding is that some of these actions have already been addressed since we've issued out this draft report. But the first thing that needs to happen is the leadership team, along with yourselves, need to set some goals or some priorities. For example, how long should a license holder have to wait to receive a license once all their information is submitted? That way, the agency can focus on, do we have enough resources to meet that goal? Or do we need to get some more resources? It could be you want to set a target, I don't know, I'm just pulling numbers out, say 30 days. Well, what's it going to take in order to meet that objective? The second one is we suggest that you take a holistic project approach to whenever you're implementing changes, whether it be information technology or just a minor process within the licensing system. That way you can adjust to and look at what is the impact of this change making on not only the processes within the licensing function, but say for instance, background checks or with information technology or your call center. Then the other one is we think that the reporting processes need to be improved. If you look at your reports, you're getting basically bulk numbers, and it doesn't tell you where that license application is residing within the process. But in order to do that, you need to be actually capturing the information through some various flags within your information system. One of those was implemented while we were conducting the audit, and that is, used to be you reported on an application from the time it was actually received, whether or not it was fully complete with all the documentation, until the time it goes out the door. But there's various things that can hold that up, and so it's kind of skewing your numbers because a lot of those licenses go out very quickly. The other thing is we believe that ultimately in the long run you might need to develop a customized licensing system. And the reason we think that is because right now you're running on different systems to complete the process. For example, Outlook, things come through email, things come through your web page, and other items come in the mail. And that all eventually has to get into your licensing system. Well, that, regardless of the way it's coming to you, it's all manually entered. So if your current provider can't integrate all of that into one seamless interface to gain efficiencies and make sure that nothing's going through the gaps, you're most likely looking at developing a customized solution for yourselves. And then this one was completed, and we recommended that the division creates an LRS business analyst position to help you extract all the data out of your system and interpret that data. And so you should be starting to see some improvements in that area. I'll be happy to answer any questions either today or in the long run as you go through the report, but this was an informational item.
Commissioner Wilkinson.
Thank you for your report. And just on the questions you have of us to look at, could you get us a list of those so we could really think through them?
Sure, absolutely. I'll run that up through Mr. Oldmixon.
Any other questions? Okay.
So this next information that I'm presenting to you is actually the fiscal year 2020 annual internal audit plan, and this does require approval from you. We're proposing now to this coming year to look at the background check and investigations compliance process. It kind of integrates all together. So first we looked at the call center, then we looked at the licensing, and now we were proposing to look at the background investigation to see if there's any improvements in those areas that we can look at and recommend. So that, along with some hours reserved for the licensure activities, the RCS activities, and some statutory compliance, such as this report, we're proposing 251 hours for a total of $27,411.
Okay.
Okay.
Seek a motion.
Move the commission approve the recommendation for the internal audit plan for fiscal year 2020.
Second.
Have a motion, a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We will go back to agenda item number 11 on public comments, and I've received No paper, so we will go to agenda item number 29. We're going to bounce around the agenda some to try to get some sausage made before the executive committee. Agenda item 29 is the budget. Executive Director Doug O'Mixon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. Since 2009, this commission has raised fees once, and that was at the time that we attained SDSI status, to ensure, because that was an unknown, so we made a slight adjustment, $10 for every license fee and renewal. And then we also reorganized the fees once to ensure that the education function, which was being significantly subsidized by licensing fees, was actually generating more revenues directly related to the education review function. So that was a realignment of fees. And every year for the past 4 years, this commission has lowered fees. And one of the features of your budget here today is an additional recommendation to lower fees again. And there are two parts to that. But before I get into that in specific detail, I wanted to turn your attention to page 273 of your materials and just both recap and then kind of catch up and set the ground rules for the recommendations that are incorporated into this budget proposal. Okay? So you will see on that page, I'm going to work down the lines there. Effective 1 March of 2019, we reduced the sponsorship fees from $20 to $10, and we eliminated the license history fees by making license histories available free online. And that had an impact to our reduction in revenues for a full year of almost $563,000. And so that is baked into your budget going forward, that reduction in revenue. Okay? Per sunset legislation that has been passed, it is required that we eliminate the branch office licenses, and that's something that we recommended to the Sunset Commission, and they adopted it. And so that has an annual effect of about $34,550 that will not be collected annually going forward, as well as eliminating the licensing of instructors. So there were fees connected to 7 different categories of instructors and a blanket across the board. The authority to license instructors was removed from our jurisdiction, and while we retained the right to set the standards, the qualifications for instructors, the providers of education will be the ones who will be determining whether or not those instructors meet those standards subject to our audit. Okay, and so it's a change in the way we do business, allowing the market a little more flexibility so that there's not, everyone doesn't have to be screened by us. The providers can do the screening against those standards, and then we'll just audit them from time to time. That reduces our annual revenues by another $189,000. That is also baked into this budget, that reduction in revenue. Now, based on the work of the Budget Committee and staff, we went back and looked at the number of fees where we had a very low number of instances where we collected those fees. So we'll just call them miscellaneous fees. Okay, and we started with those that had the very smallest number of collections, and proceeded to recommend simplifying our fee chart by eliminating those fees where especially where the amount of time that's necessary to collect, account for, reconcile, and then pursue the collection of, if unpaid appropriately, was taking more time than we were generating in revenue in the first place. And so that fee simplification includes a duplicate license fee. So these are the highlighted items, the first four on your chart there. Duplicate license fee of $20, return check fee of $30, and miscellaneous change fees of $20, as well as the paper processing fees. When we adopted a policy of pursuing all of our applications to be available online, we adopted a corresponding disincentive, if you will. Incentive to go online, disincentive to send in paper. If you sent in paper, you were charged an additional $20. Over the years, that has done exactly what it was meant to do, and that is it has incentivized folks to move online. So much so that today we're at less than 0.8% of all of our applications that we have available online are actually done on paper. And so it has achieved its objective, and so we're also recommending that it be eliminated. Okay? And so all of those together are about $130,000, $129,980 plus. Sorry, it's a total of $152,397, as our budget chair reminded us in the report. $152,397 total recommended fee eliminations that they have unequivocally recommended to you, approved by the Budget Committee and recommended to you for final adoption in this budget. That on the revenue side, deals with what I will call version A of the budget. And version A of the budget is found on page, sorry, I see. I turned it over here. Page 269 and 270. Okay, 269 and 270, version A. And so the only difference between version A and version B is what I'm about to explain to you now. And if you will continue looking at page 273, the sponsorship categories of fees that are not highlighted, the last three items on that spreadsheet. If we were to eliminate, so if you recall, up above, we reduced the sponsorship fees from $20 to $10 effective March the 1st of this year. If we eliminate them entirely as of January the 1st, which would be the earliest that we could implement that, it would reduce our revenue in total for a full year of $511,000 and change. So let's just say $512,000, additional $512,000. The Budget Committee looked at this and thought positively about it, remarked positively about it, but they did not offer a recommendation to you. They felt it important that a change of that magnitude be fully vetted with the full commission. And so although they have looked at it and liked it, that is the difference between version A and version B of the budget. And that is to eliminate one additional category of fees, taking that $10 that remains in sponsorship, of which the 99% of the sponsorships are done online already. And so we would just simply zero out the fee connected to that online transaction, which we have very little, there's very little labor involved on our side because we designed the system to make it self-service. And so that really is the revenue difference. The expenses are the same in versions A and B of the budget. The revenue differences are that version B assumes that as of January 1, this fee would also be eliminated, so then reducing our revenues by about $380,000 over that 8 months that remain, but permanently going forward $512,000 a year on average. Okay?
Let me comment on that, Doug.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. That was something that we thought would be best, but it was a decision that I thought should be made by the whole commission. That is a big number, and I realize why I'm sitting over here by myself today. But that's something that we should really take seriously because it is going to be an ongoing reduction.
So I'm happy to answer any questions on the revenue side before we actually work through the notes. And I just have a few highlight notes, and then I'll answer any questions on the expense side as well, and the reconciliation.
Commissioner Turner.
Can you just help us understand what the sponsorship fees are
Absolutely.
a little better, please? Why, when are they generated? Why are they generated? Why were they put in place initially? Why might they be? I understand they might be obsolete, perhaps because there's not a whole lot of work associated with accomplishing whatever this task is, but I don't know what they are.
I apologize for that.
Admittedly.
I made an assumption about that. The sponsorship fees, the largest category, of course, is that every sales agent licensed in Texas must be sponsored by a broker. And so establishing that relationship, that sponsor-sponsoree relationship, can be initiated by either party, and then it has to be reciprocated. So it has to be mutual assent, and we've done all of that, think friending on Facebook, if you will. You make an offer, and then the other person says yes. And then it establishes a relationship, and it also terminates. Sales agents are not allowed to have more than one sponsoring broker at a time, so that everything they do is on behalf of that, and that broker is responsible for that, the essence of broker responsibility. So that's a very large number. We do over 50,000 of those pretty much every year. Yeah, about 1,000 a week.
Other comments or questions?
On the fee side?
On the fee side.
To be clear, the commission doesn't need the money.
Oh, that's correct. And that there is another point that I will point that out to you as we move to the documents here, if you would. And so let me address that line specifically. If you will look at the kind of the center column that says FY 2019 year-end estimated expenditures. Okay, if you'll look at version A of the budget, page 269. And this is the same on version B as well. But if you look at that column, year-end estimated expenditures, and go all the way down to the very bottom, okay, you will see that although we have continued to reduce fees every year for the past 4 years, and are making this recommendation for additional fee simplification and reduction this year, we are still the beneficiaries of an enormous amount of good. The economy in Texas is doing well, and real estate is doing particularly well. And so we have an abundance of people who want to be in the business. And so we have net increased sales and broker license numbers by, on average, for the past 5 years, more than 8,000 every year for the last 5 years. And so we continue to have this abundance of blessings. And so if you look at that number, you will see that even though we anticipated after our budget adjustments for last year, that's the column immediately to the left of that, so it shows a negative of about $90,000. Well, that's not the budget that you approved, but that's with the amendments that we've made over the year to add additional people. We moved money from reserves into operations, and so we end up with a negative there. But the actual number that we believe, this is our best projection. In November, we'll give you the true number, but our best projection for August 31st of this year is that we will still be $2.7 million ahead. Okay? As I said, it's an abundance of blessings, but it both creates this opportunity, an obligation and an opportunity. So the obligation is to find ways to control those funds, not collecting what we don't need, okay? And then expending the funds well in the service of our mission, both on behalf of the people of Texas and our license holders, our stakeholders. But at that, so just looking at that number, you know, it's almost a no-brainer to say we can afford to cut our fees another $500,000. And if you agree with that, then the appropriate motion would be to approve budget version B, and then we have appropriate fee rules, both version A and version B, prepared in your materials, depending on what your decision is on the budget. Yes, Commissioner.
My thought is always, what if we will have another recession?
Of course we will.
So will the commission still have enough? I feel like they will without this, because it doesn't cost them anything anyway, and it was kind of maybe a pad to get money in at some point. Do you feel that in the future we'll ever have to go up? Because saying it's gone is easy.
Sure.
Raising it again is a real hassle.
No, understood. So looking into my crystal ball, I can only say that I absolutely am confident that the elimination of these particular fees will not cause the agency any concern in the future, okay? If there ever is a need to raise fees, there are a couple of just kind of more easily justifiable places for that to happen. And the economies of scale that come from this fee simplification actually ripples throughout the agency. So all of the folks in licensing don't have to deal with it. IT doesn't have to deal with it. Our staff and support services and accounting and all of that, it really is kind of one of the overdue simplifications. And so we're very, very pleased to have had the opportunity to present that to the Budget Committee and receive their endorsement, and then happy to answer any additional questions you have about the budget. I would offer just a couple of comments on the expense side to make sure that that you guys are comfortable with it, not just having a blanket, you know, ready for a motion. So. Anything
Doug,
else on the
let me
revenue
ask
side?
one more question.
Yes, sir.
We also have, what's the number of funds, the amount of funds that we have in reserve?
We still have, hang on, if you will turn to page, whatever the very next page is, it'll be 270, yes? Page 270. And I apologize for this eye test But to get all the information onto pages so that you can see them. You will see in, let's see, it says here, Strategic Reserve Fund. You see that line item? Okay. As of this very day, having achieved the customer service advances that we have talked about previously, adding additional people, all of those kinds of things, we still haven't touched that fund. We haven't touched that fund. So there's $11.5 million basically in that fund. So if we, and this budget assumes that we will move $3.4 million into operations from that fund this year, okay, as a part of this budget to make sure that we have sufficient for all of our one-time and our recurring expenses. Recurring things we talked about in additional staff, and then we have a variety of one-time expenses, all of which is detailed on pages 271 and 272 that are incorporated into that budget. Okay, total increase of almost 1.8 million year over year, but the majority of that is in one-time expenses versus recurring. So about 1.5 million is in one-time costs, and the other is in recurring costs.
Commissioner Miller, we're in a good position. So it's a very good question that you asked, because it is always going to be a rainy day. But if we're going to do some of the things for our agents, I think now is the best time to do it.
Yes, sir. Commissioner.
So our strategic reserve fund is the renamed, or previously known as, long-term facilities.
Correct.
Planning fund, or I believe something like that. So I know that we renamed it, and that's great. I have a question. Do we have in place a reserve policy for general expenditures, e.g. 1 quarter worth of anticipated expenditures for the upcoming fiscal year? And again, forgive my ignorance.
No, it's quite all right.
Probably know by now, and is that reflected elsewhere?
If you look at page 277, you'll see the budget development policy, and I apologize, the reserve policy is not in there, but we do have a reserve policy, and it is reflected on that page 270. You will see in the center of the page, there's a couple of highlighted numbers there. It says FY20 budget expenses 14.5 million, and 21 budget expenses 14.75 million. Right below that, it says 30% to 40%. That is the budget range, the operating reserve range that this commission set as a policy in addition to the strategic. That's the very first reserve, is our operating reserve.
Right, so I got you. And that's the one that's actually the very first in this sort of brownish highlighter under projected cash balance. We have reserve for current operations and contingencies. That's our operations reserve.
That's correct.
So, and I just want our commission to realize that as well, that we also have $4.5 million set aside as an operating reserve. So the $11.5 million that's in the strategic reserve fund is in addition to what we've decided to set aside for operations. So because we've abandoned the idea of a new facility, we have an opportunity here to really make some significant improvements to this agency. We have a lot of resources available to us.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Commissioner Williams, thank you for your work on the hard work on the budget committee. I appreciate that. When would be your recommendation, whoever, for the elimination of the $10 sponsorship fee, should we vote to do that?
It would be a motion that I believe Commissioner Williams is prepared to make as soon as you guys are ready. as soon as you have no more questions about the budget. I did want to say two things about expenses, if I might. We talked about the one-time and the increase, one-time and the recurring and the one-time expenses. And I just wanted to highlight that under our budget development policy and our compensation policy, internal compensation policy, that's approved as a part of this budget, we are committed to remain competitive. You heard Director Hood say previously that we're able to get better staff members in the contact center because we pay better than other state agencies in that regard. And I want to make sure that we stay there. Okay? And so this particular budget includes a cost of living adjustment for all of the staff that are not otherwise entitled to merit adjustments and not on probation, initial probation or whatever, of $1,200 per year effective September the 1st. So another $100 per month as a cost of living adjustment across the board. That's included in here as well. So I just want you guys to be aware of that.
One more question, Mr.
Yes,
Chair.
Commissioner Turner.
First of all, that's great. I'd like to do even more if we could, but we had kicked around, you guys had presented, staff had presented some ideas, and this has more to do with policy than it does just presentation and adoption of the budget. But one or two meetings ago, staff had presented, I wouldn't call it a wish list, just a few ideas of what we could do with our strategic reserve fund.
Correct.
And I'd just like a refresher on where we are with that. Is that something we're going to discuss as a commission in November at our retreat and make sure that those are going to be, those recommendations are going to be prepared for us, and that commission members have the opportunity to supply any suggestions they may have prior to that discussion?
Thank you, Commissioner Turner, for reminding us of that, where we are in that process. I would say that on the, to use that colloquial term, the wish list, what could we do with the money? What other things would we like? Probably 60% of the wish list items are included already in this budget. Now, so most of those were not huge items, but even getting to the reorganization or the redesign of our space and new equipment, new offices, all of those kinds of things, they're included in this budget as well. Once this is adopted at your pleasure, then we'll take that list and develop some additional detail for consideration at the workshop. And when our general counsel sends out the invitation, and you guys can talk about it at the end of this meeting as well, for future agenda items, that's one of the reminders to make sure that we provide you with what staff recommendations have been that are not already incorporated and approved, but that might be considered going forward, and then opportunity for the commissioners to do the same, to weigh in on those kinds of things. Okay?
So it's time to move that the commission approve the staff recommendation for the budget of 2020. All in favor?
Version B?
Version B.
No,
version B.
Version B. I'm sorry. Thank
We
you.
have a motion?
Second.
Second. Motion second. Any further discussion? Commissioner Turner?
I'll ask. I'm not Turner. But
I'm sorry, Leonard.
Thank you, Bill. And what date would we implement this?
The effective date for the fee reductions that are not mandated by statute, the two, but all these discretionary ones is January the 1st. Mm-hmm. January the 1st. And I also wanted to report on one, well, I'll let you hold the vote first.
Any further discussion?
Second.
All in favor? Virgin.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries.
One additional thing I would just draw your attention to, because it is incorporated into the budget, looking back again at page 273. We have been wanting for a long time to take advantage of a background history check innovation that is offered by the FBI and the DPS called the wrap-back system. And long story short, it will reduce the amount that we collect from every license holder going forward from January 1 as our target date to implement that as well. It's a pass-through fee, so you don't see it in the budget. Okay, we collect it from license holders and then give it directly to DPS based on an invoice. That process, the wrap-back process involves the person whose fingerprints that we have obtained consenting to the DPS and FBI simply notifying us anytime there's a hit on their record, rather than us recollecting a fee and then resubmitting their prints every 2 years to check and see if there's a hit on their record. It would just be automatic. As soon as they approve it, excuse me, as soon as the individual gives their consent, we notify DPS, and it is permanently now a part of their record that says, if there's a hit on this record, send notice to TREC. Okay? Same for the board as well. The implementation of that long-term savings to our license holders, $28.25 every license renewal. That's permanent. Okay? Never to be collected again, God willing. And they don't change the rules on us one more time. But it will require us to set up a quality control system. Not every person has already, every license holder has already given that consent. And so at the time of renewal, the next time after January 1, when someone renews, if they've already given us consent, no problem. We just don't collect the fee. Okay? They renew in the normal course. We'll never collect the fee again. If they have not yet given us the consent, it will be presented to them electronically to be electronically validated and signed and then stored in our system, and then we won't collect the fee anymore. If they refuse to provide their consent, okay, then at this particular point, we have this, because it's such a simple thing and it is a positive for our license holders, that we simply would, it's a requirement to renew that your fingerprints be checked again. And so it'll be a requirement to renew that you give us consent for the future going forward. In other words, you will not be able to renew if you have not consented to that change in process. That's what we propose. That's how we propose to implement it. So I'm happy to answer any questions about that. I just wanted to make sure that you guys knew that that was also coming down the pike.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
I would like to add,
Congratulations.
I thank the Budget Committee for working on this and staff. I would really like in 2020 to probably have 1, 2, or maybe even 3 budget workshops with all the commissioners. That way we have a better understanding of exactly what's going on. Even though we did a good job cutting fees, you know, I still think there might be some stuff we can look at. I know the providers are a very intricate part of our commission, and we really didn't look at their fees and streamline some of their processes. So I would like the whole commission next year to be involved in the actual process. That way we might be able to vet it. Did an excellent job, but I think that might be something we can do in the coming years, get more commissioners involved in this. Agenda item number 30. It's about 11:35. We're planning on going till about noon before we go into executive session, so I'm going to try to get some more stuff done. Chelsea.
That's great. Okay. I'm going to present a few rules to you, 30, 31, 32, and Ms. Warman and I are going to go back and forth a little bit. Agenda item 30, discussion and possible action to implement legislative changes enacted by Senate Bill 624, which is our sunset legislation, and fee changes related to the fiscal year 2020 budget and proposed amendments to 535.101 regarding fees, 535.210, another fee rule, and the repeal of 534.2 for processing fees for dishonored payments. The decision you just made regarding the budget affects this agenda item in that you have two sets of rules before you, version A and version B. We will review only version B based on your decision to approve the version B budget. So the amendments before you to 535.101 and .210 eliminate fees to license holders to implement the changes of the sunset recommendations and also statutory requirements related to sunset. We have been given a management directive to limit fund growth and to provide straightforward fee setting, and this does that. It also adds provisions to address the process for a follow-up payment after a dishonored payment, which is currently addressed in a rule proposed for repeal here. And it adds the ability of the Commission to place a license on inactive status if a payment is not received. So because we're looking at version B, this rule also additionally eliminates the fee to establish or change the relationship of a sponsoring broker. And then on the inspector side, it does the same, establishing the relationship with a sponsoring professional inspector or a license holder name change on the inspector side. The language to 535.4 is proposed for repeal simply because we are incorporating that information into the fee rules so that license holders can go to one place to find that information. So staff recommends that you authorize staff on behalf of the Commission to submit version B of the proposed amendments to 22 TAC 535.101 and .210 and the proposed repeal of 534.2 as presented, along with any technical or non-substantive changes required for proposal to the Texas Register for publication and public comment.
I move that the Commission approve the staff's recommendation.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries.
Chairman, are you ready for agenda item 31?
Agenda 31, yes, ma'am.
Okay, this is the discussion and possible action to implement legislative changes enacted in Senate Bill 1200 regarding military applicants and license holders, and proposed amendments and new rule to 22 TAC 535.51, 535.58, and 535.208. So these changes were motivated by Senate Bill 1200, but are broader than that. I want to be clear. First, the proposed amendments to 535.51 and the third rule, 535.208, eliminates the Texas residency requirement for license eligibility. This is pursuant to sunset legislation. This is a requirement of sunset. It also removes the licensing provisions related to military service members, military veterans, and military spouses. And this is done in order to consolidate all of the, what I will call military-related rules into one place, the new 535.58. It was added to provide that clarity to the license requirements related to military service members, veterans, and spouses by consolidating those into a separate rule. Part G of that rule implements Senate Bill 1200, which allows military spouses with a license in another state or territory to practice in Texas if the license in another jurisdiction is, quote, substantially similar. There are very few states that come close to this requirement. The closest we've found is North Carolina. But it may be that not a single state actually satisfies that requirement. That's up to our licensing department, and they're doing an evaluation of that right now. So, but the rule is required by statute for a rule of this sort to be in place by December 1 of 2019. So the staff recommendation is to authorize staff on behalf of the commission to submit the proposed amendments to 535.51, the new rule 535.58, and proposed amendments to 535.208 as presented, along with any technical or non-substantive changes required for proposal to the Texas Register for publication and public comment.
Have a motion?
Move that the staff, that the commission approve our staff's recommendation.
Motion is second. Any discussion?
Yes. My note when I went through this was how to do it or who is going to be judging what is substantially equivalent.
Great question, and that would basically come from our licensing department and leadership on evaluating that. We can bring, as that evolves and develops, we're happy to come forward and bring you kind of a report of how that's going and what it's looking like. Sounds like Mr. Olmixon may have something to say. No.
I was just going to comment that in this area, the substantially equivalent area, right now there's a significant movement afoot nationwide to conform license requirements through reciprocity and recognition and a variety of other mechanisms. And Arello actually has a committee, a study group, that is working on this specific issue. And so those of you who are going to the annual conference will hear a report from that, but we actually have a meeting next week. I'm on that committee, and Chelsea's been assisting with that as well. And so trying to actually break it down to a point where we can kind of across the board say, well, this amount of education and this amount of experience substantially equivalent, even if it's not course per course per course per number of hours. Does that make sense?
I've been trying to control agents that were educated in the Texas regimen for a long time. I'm sorry, I've seen Kentucky contracts. It's not going to be equivalent. And y'all are still going to expect brokers in Texas to be able to control these people that haven't had the education that's required here. I got a real problem with it, so I don't know how much leeway the commission has based on the legislative requirement as opposed to who's going to be the judge. And Jennifer, you got a hard job, kid.
Well, if I may, I can tell you that historically in evaluations and comparisons with other state agencies, we have had none. There have been none that have been able to satisfy substantially the same requirement as we do. So without any changes to the other states' level of education and requirements, I don't see that.
So you just get to say no.
To date.
Commissioner, if I could just expound on that a little bit. You're right. You're absolutely right that, Texas legal principles are not taught anywhere else. And so that will never be equivalent, and we'll never say, I'm sorry, you can come and work here immediately without understanding Texas legal principles. That'll never happen. At least as far as I can't imagine it under the statutory requirements. However, the general principles of agency law and real estate contracts, not our specific contracts, but contract law, those are the kinds of things that we're looking at giving some recognition of that education, whether it was taken somewhere else or not. But it'll never be license for license.
Mr. Slagle just brought up a great point in the form of a very formal Post-it note. I wanted to give him credit. This may be an easier requirement to satisfy, if those are the right words, for inspectors after we complete the new education requirements for inspectors. We may be closer to satisfying that.
Okay, just one more follow-up on the discussion. After reading this provisional license, whatever we want to call it, cannot be renewed and can only be used for 3 years, correct?
Correct.
So can we...
Or the amount of, or the amount of time that, that the license holder lives in Texas, whichever is shorter.
Okay, so at the end of 3 years, they would theoretically be required to have the same hours as every Texas license, but we couldn't require someone that's close to take Texas promulgated contracts or law contracts prior to submitting like 60 hours versus the 270 required? Is that some options in this?
We could not make those requirements of someone, of the military spouse who will be practicing in this state if substantially similar for those 3 years. We could do so afterwards.
Okay. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Agenda item number 32.
Okay, last one for me, and then you get a break from me. This is the discussion and possible action to implement legislative changes enacted by Senate Bill 624 relating to branch office and instructor licenses and proposed amendments in repeal to 22 TAC 535.57, .60, .67, .70, .72, and .112. The last one is the repeal. These changes are made simply to implement sunset requirements under Senate Bill 624, and they do two things. I'm not going to walk through every rule unless you'd like for me to. They eliminate the requirement to approve instructors as required under the bill, and then it also repeals the rule that requires a branch office license. So all of these are conforming changes to Senate Bill 624. So staff recommend, or we recommend that you authorize staff on behalf of the commission to submit the proposed amendments to 22 TAC 535.57, 535.60, 535.67, 535.70, 535.72, and the repeal of 535.112 as presented, along with any technical or non-substantive changes required for proposal to the Texas Register for publication and public comment.
Move that the commission approve our staff's recommendation.
Second.
Have a motion, a second. Any discussion on agenda item number 32?
I have one question. I thought that the commission, I understand that we are removing instructor licensing, as it were, but we could still have requirements of instructors that they meet
Correct.
certain experience requirements, et cetera. So are we painting with too broad a brush by removing any reference to commission approval of instructors?
It's a very good question. That is me simply moving too quickly. The rules here and really throughout today's agenda, because these come up in a couple of different places, establish and allow for qualifications to be met. Those qualifications will be vetted instead of by the commission. They will be vetted by providers, education providers. And then our enforcement arm will come through providers, and then we will also audit those providers on the qualifications.
Thank you very much for the clarification.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Going back to agenda item number 31, Commissioner Miller did abstain. Let the record show. Okay, agenda item number 33, Kristen Werman.
Good morning, Commissioners. It is still morning. Agenda item 33 is the discussion and possible action to implement legislative changes enacted in Senate Bill 37 that would eliminate consideration of student loan defaults when issuing a license, and Senate Bill 624 authorizing the denial of a license renewal if a license holder is in violation of a commission order. And this agenda item would propose amendments to several of the commission rules, specifically Rule 535.61, 535.62, 535.71, 535.73, 535.91, 535.403, and 543.12. I'm happy to walk through each of the rules if you need that. Otherwise, the staff recommendation is to authorize staff on behalf of the commission to submit the proposed amendments to 22 TAC 535.61, 0.62, 0.71, 0.73, 0.91, 0.403, and 543.12 as presented, along with any technical or non-substantive changes required for proposal to the Texas Register for publication and public comment. Question?
Can you give me an example of violation of a commission order?
Yes. For example, if someone hasn't paid the administrative penalty or complied with another term in a commission order, such as notifying their broker.
That's what I thought, but I
Entertain them.
I'll move that the commission.
Have a motion, have a second. Discussion, Commissioner Turner? All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Agenda item number 34.
This agenda item is discussion and possible action to implement legislative changes enacted in Senate Bill 624 applicable to complaints filed on or after September 1st of 2019. This agenda item proposes amendments to 22 TAC 535.191 and 535.219. These proposed amendments simply conform the statutory references in these two rules with the changes made in Senate Bill 24. If there are no questions, I will move to the staff recommendation.
Move the commission approve the staff's recommendation.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Agenda item number 35.
Agenda item 35 is discussion and possible action to implement legislative changes enacted in Senate Bill 624 regarding public comments, removal of the term moral character, dismissal of complaints, and elimination of residency requirements. This agenda item proposes amendments to 22 TAC 535.41, 535.52, 535.142, and 535.400. The staff recommendation is to authorize staff on behalf of the commission to submit the proposed amendments to these rules as presented, along with any technical or non-substantive changes required for proposal to the Texas Register for publication and public comment. Unless there are any questions about each of the rule, I won't go through each of the proposed amendments.
Move the commission approve staff recommendation.
Second.
Have a motion to approve in a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Agenda item number 36.
This agenda item is discussion and possible action to align the response times with other TREC rules and propose conforming amendments to 22 TAC 535.402, 539.150, and 543.5. These amendments would change the timeframe to respond to a commission request for information from 10 working days to 14 days to align these sections with other commission rules and provide greater clarity to respondents. Staff recommends that the commission authorize staff to submit the proposed amendments to these 3 rules as presented, along with any technical or non-substantive changes required for proposal to the Texas Register for publication and public comment. Unless you have any questions, I will not walk through the specific amendments.
At the risk
Commissioner Leonard.
the risk of, I don't want to get in the weeds, but would the 14 days include state and national holidays?
It would, yes.
It is 14 calendar days regardless.
Correct. As opposed to the 10 working days.
Any other discussion? A motion? Do we have a motion?
Move that we, go ahead.
Move the commission approve our staff's recommendation.
Second? Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Agenda item number 37, Chelsea. And Chelsea, you're the only one keeping us from executive session and those fine people out there from lunch.
Okay, these next 2 rules are fairly substantive, but I'm going to do my very best to go quickly. This is discussion and possible action to propose amendments in a new rule to 22 TAC Chapter 535 regarding inspectors as follows. Amendments to 535.208, .212, 213, and then a new .214. These rules have been before you at your May meeting. Later in the agenda, earlier in the agenda, but later today, I will be recommending that you withdraw the current rules 535.209, 212, and 213 from the register. They were proposed in May. We are re-proposing them here today. So agenda item 37 is a re-proposal of those, and also the addition of 535.214. The reason for this is the restructuring of pre-licensing inspector education. When we brought it to you in May, we did not include a transition period from the old set of rules to the new set of rules for inspector education. And as we began to think about the implementation of these new rules, it became clear that there needed to be a transition period. So these new proposals simply add in a transition period. The new rule 535.214 will eventually replace 535.212, but both rules need to be available, I should say, for some period of time, for the transition period. So in a future meeting, we will ask that you repeal 535.212. I can walk through all of these, but I will basically tell you that this creates an expiration date of April 30th of 2020 to sign up to utilize the old education requirements, and it requires that education be complete by the end of July. On May 1st of 2020 is the first opportunity for inspectors or for potential inspectors to begin taking the new education courses. So these rules include those dates in the newly proposed rules. So with that, if there are no questions, I'd like to recommend that you authorize staff on behalf of the Commission to submit the proposed amendments to 22 TAC 535.209, 535.212, 535.213, and new rule 535.214 as presented, along with any technical or non-substantive changes required for proposal to the Texas Register for publication and public comment.
Move the commission approve our staff's recommendation.
Have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Agenda item number 38.
Okay. This is, as I mentioned, in a broker-lawyer committee report. These forms are before you as recommended by the broker-lawyer committee for amendments. So this is discussion and possible action to propose amendments to 22 TAC Chapter 537 regarding standard contract forms. I will not list all of them out. So the Broker-Lawyer Committee has recommended revisions to these contract forms adopted by reference under the proposed amendments to Chapter 535. This is to address all issues that have arisen since the last round of contract revisions. The changes listed below apply to all contracts unless they're otherwise noted. There are some non-substantive changes here, but I will highlight a few of the substantive changes. The language of paragraph 4 was moved to the end of paragraph 8, and that paragraph 8 is retitled license holders. That allows for some subject matter grouping and ordering within the contract. The language was added to paragraph 4 to address leases to which a seller is a party, and requires that the seller acknowledge that buyer has received a copy of all leases or will receive within 3 days after the effective date. The buyer may terminate the contract after a receipt of the leases within a period of days set in the contract. And then paragraph 4 also prohibits a seller from executing any new lease or amending any lease without the buyer's written consent after the effective date of the contract. So this new language is expanded from what was previously in paragraph 10 to address the many different types of leases that can affect a property and the delivery of those leases to the buyer. I'll then skip down to the language that was deleted from the broker information page of all the forms except the farm and ranch contract. This is intended to avoid confusion and possible conflicts. This means that all commission information, meaning not TREC, not Big C commission, but money commission, information will not be part of the contract. It is simply not part of the contract today. It is after the it's information that's included. This becomes confusing. The brokers are not a party to the contract, so the broker-lawyer committee saw this as an inappropriate placement of that information. The information is relied upon by title companies often, but it is very often incomplete. The compensation of brokers, as discussed by the committee, should be addressed through other means, as their opinion. I can walk through all of the additional changes, but most of them are very simple in nature. Okay, recommendation is to authorize staff on behalf of the commission to submit the proposed amendments to Title 22 of TAC Chapter 537, along with any forms adopted by reference as presented, along with any technical or non-substantive changes required for proposal to the Texas Register for publication and public comment.
I have a question.
Okay.
The elimination of the verbiage regarding commission, it's not part of our contracts anyway.
Correct.
We're not, I mean, it's an information, I look at it as nothing more than an additional clarification of who's paying who owes what. What is the thought process in eliminating that piece of information?
I believe that the committee saw it as confusing in that it is not part of the contract, but some people believe that it is. And so by including it there, it inherently, it clearly is not legally not part of the contract, but in people's thoughts, it becomes that. The committee also received several requests to expand that section, and their response was instead to eliminate it, thinking that this agreement between brokers needed to be elsewhere, in MLS often, or with another sort of agreement.
May I?
Yes.
I think I'm sorry. I had the same questions, Bob. But I think what they are reacting to is that people are using commission little c, commission dollars as negotiating ploys, back and forth, and going against the prior written agreements, being a listing agreement or a buyer rep. And this is trying to alleviate that, I think.
And let me add, if we can get a motion in a second for this and then some discussion, this is proposed, and I think broker lawyer's going to have several phone calls, emails, and text over the next, after it's posted, but this is proposed. Okay. Can I have a motion?
Waiting for a motion.
Like a motion before the discussion.
I'll move that the commission approve staff's recommendation.
Second.
Okay. Now, any further discussion? I think all of us has concerns. Like I say, it is proposed. It will be posted. Any more discussion? Doug, anything on the elimination of that verbiage that hasn't been covered?
No, I think it's fairly straightforward, and it will be robustly commented on, I know, by lots of stakeholders. It has every time it's come up. And so you will have an opportunity to hear from a bunch of folks. The committee will, broker lawyer committee will, and then this commission again at the next meeting.
And I should say that if this commission has collective ideas on that provision or any of the other changes to the forms, you can provide those comments in written form or even just through your comments in this room today to the broker lawyer committee for their consideration. Because as you know, the process is the broker lawyer committee can make revisions and then bring their recommendations back to you, and you may approve them or turn them down but not change them. So this is a good opportunity to provide them with feedback for them to have a clear understanding of what you would approve.
Okay. Have a motion, second. More discussion?
Yeah, and just a question. At the bottom of page 349, the language added to paragraph 4 to address leases. Has this been a real problem? I know the commission ends up getting complaints and fights about stuff, but I have not seen that as sellers signing leases of, say, oil rights or whatever after a contract is executed. Has it been a problem that I just haven't heard about?
A good question. It wasn't discussed as a problem in the broker lawyer committee. That kind of evolved as, oh yeah, and it shouldn't be allowed to have leases after the assigned contract. So it wasn't to address a problem on that front as they were deciding.
It's just then the brokers have to train around it and they won't understand it, but okay.
And then I'll also mention on that provision, one of the ways in which this change was generated was because of the new kinds of leases that are cropping up just in the market. For instance, solar panels. That was the
burglar alarms.
Okay, we have a motion, second. Any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. It is 9 minutes after 12. We're going to go into executive session. We estimate that will be about an hour and a half. Let me say not to exceed an hour and a half, and then we will re-adjourn. We're adjourned at 12:09. Adjourn the commission meeting at 1:37. We will start with agenda item number 13B, and I would like to pass the gavel to Commissioner Turner.
It's called 13B, Mr. Chair. What time is Mr. Kaplan's?
2 o'clock.
2 o'clock, thank you. So we will call at this time agenda item 13B. This is SOA docket number 329190711, David C. Bates versus TREC.
And Mr. Chair and Commissioners, I will let you know that Mr. Collins and Mr. Kaplan are both here. So But with respect to Agenda Item 13B, the matter before you is Bates versus the Texas Real Estate
Just a
Commission.
second, I'm sorry. If they're here, are you guys ready? You want to go ahead and call your agenda item? So that you don't have, okay. Forgive me for doing this out of order. Let's just go back to 13A then, since they're both here. 13A, so a docket number 329191385, Eric J. Kaplan versus TREC. Are you prepared to speak on that one? Okay, great.
And just to remind the commissioners, I'm just going to introduce the item, and then the parties will present their arguments to you. This particular agenda item, 13A, is the matter of Eric J. Kaplan versus the Texas Real Estate Commission. It is an application case. Mr. Kaplan applied for a sales agent license, and the proposal for decision before you, the administrative law judge recommends granting a probationary sales agent license with restrictions as imposed by the commission.
Is there anyone here? I know the answer to this question, but Mr. Kaplan, you're here. You also have an attorney here. Is that correct? Okay. Would you like to speak now? Yep. Got 5 minutes, okay.
And can we, will Mr. Kaplan be allowed to make a personal statement? Would that be?
Within reason, I'll let you know. We got a pretty packed agenda today, so we have to move pretty fast. But,
yes, sure. Yes. Okay.
And I'll also give you some time if necessary after we hear from staff if you'd like to make any kind of rebuttal statement, and
okay.
We'll do that too, okay?
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, well, my name is Richard Collins, and I'm representing the applicant in this case, Mr. Eric Kaplan. And we are asking that you adopt the proposed final decision as written that's been presented to you earlier today. We had a hearing earlier in the year in which Mr. Kaplan called 4 witnesses. They all were familiar with Mr. Kaplan's work history. They all had an opinion about his integrity, his truthfulness, and his honesty. They all testified that Mr. Kaplan, in their opinion, was honest and trustworthy, and he conducted his business in a transparent manner. 2 of these witnesses were licensed real estate brokers, and they testified that they would be willing to sponsor Mr. Kaplan should he obtain a salesperson license. I had previously provided to you some prior Texas Real Estate Commission decisions. One of them ones I wanted to point out to you was the Kerry Dennis Smith case, which I think has been provided to you earlier. And what I wanted to...
So I think we're having a little bit of trouble hearing you. So
okay. Can you hear me now?
That's much
okay.
better. Thank you.
All right.
Pull it down.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I had provided to you earlier the Kerry Dennis Smith case. And the reason I provided this to you is that we thought these cases were similar in the fact patterns. In the Kerry Dennis Smith case, well, first of all, we think they're similar because we don't believe that either in the Smith case or the Kaplan case that either one of these individuals or applicants were the main actors in the criminal transaction for which they were convicted. In the Kerry Dennis Smith case, Mr. Smith applied for a Texas Real Estate Commission salesperson license, and when he applied, he was on probation for the serious offense of engaging in organized criminal activity. At the time he applied, the commission disapproved his license. They had a hearing, and it was determined that basically Mr. Smith's employee was the one that actually committed the act. But Mr. Smith was held responsible because he owned the company. Nevertheless, after the hearing, the ALJ recommended a probationary license, and the commission adopted that license and gave him a probationary license. In the Kaplan case, which is similar, Mr. Kaplan worked for a family-owned business called Equity Based Services. In that company, the main actor in the criminal transaction was his father, unfortunately. The company was responsible for developing and acquiring self-storage units. Mr. Kaplan's father was responsible for the financial management of the company and was responsible for paying distributions to the company investors. Mr. Eric Kaplan, the applicant in this case, was only responsible for the management of the company once the self-storage units were acquired. He didn't interact with the investors on a direct basis. He wasn't involved in the financial aspects of the company, and he didn't attempt to solicit investors. What he did is he answered the day-to-day questions about the management and if there was a maintenance issue at the self-storage units, he would respond to that. In January of 2010, Mr. Kaplan discovered that his father was commingling and diverting funds among properties. He confronted his father about this, and he asked him what was happening. His father made assurances to him that it was legal because it was considered as loans or recorded as loans among the properties. Mr. Kaplan trusted his father and accepted his assurances. However, in September 2010, Mr. Kaplan realized the severity of his father's mismanagement and disclosed to each of the EBS investors the commingling and the conversion of funds. He also...
I'm very sorry, but I'm afraid you're going to run out of time soon, and I probably should have stopped you sooner. We've all read the materials. We've read the proposal for decision. We've read your briefing.
Okay.
So I think hopefully I'm not speaking out of turn to say that we're all familiar with the fact pattern.
Okay.
I'd like to know specifically right now what issue you take with our staff attorney's exceptions to the proposal for decision. There also is an important question here today is that the SOA judge made the recommendation that your client should be granted a probationary license with any stipulations that the commission sees fit.
Yes.
So do you have, if this commission were to adopt the proposal for decision, we're going to have to place some stipulations on that probationary license. Do you have any specific requests in that regard?
Well, I think I presented a proposed order for your review. Have you had a chance to look at that?
Yes, sir.
It addresses all the conditions that we would think are appropriate for this kind of case.
Okay.
He obviously needs to be on probation while he's on probation. He's currently complied with the terms and conditions of his probation, and Judge Egan made that finding of fact in her proposed final decision. So we're willing to accept any stipulations that you believe are appropriate in this kind of case. And like I said earlier, there were 2 licensed real estate brokers that were willing to sponsor Mr. Kaplan should he obtain this license and would be responsible for his actions.
Okay. Anybody else have any more questions for Mr. Collins at this time? Would you like your client to speak now or after we've heard from our staff attorney?
He can go ahead and speak now.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you for allowing me to speak. There's nothing I'm more ashamed or embarrassed about than the actions I took 9 years ago, which resulted in me being here before you today. Since it's happened, I've made the conscious decision to use the experience to become a better person and a better businessman. I've rededicated my life to my family and to my community, and I hope you would see this reflected in the administrative judge's recommendation. I believe my character rehabilitation is also illustrated by the fact I have never had another legal incident in the 9 years since it happened initially, and any time prior before it as well. I'm the primary wage earner in my family, which is the most important role in my life. I have a 14-year-old daughter, Ava, a 12-year-old daughter, Bella, and a 10-year-old son, David, who I've supported before, during, and after the incident 9 years ago. Last year, David, my son, was diagnosed with the type 1 diabetes, and my wife, Maria, and I have been very active not only helping him, but volunteering to help parents of newly diagnosed children guide their way through their new traumatic reality. My volunteering carries over to my professional life as well. I lead seminars with the Texas Self-Storage Association, covering subjects such as due diligence, market studies, and improving operations. One of the most important lessons I've learned throughout this entire ordeal is to be overly transparent about every business dealing. At my current job, my main task is to draft feasibility studies to assess locations and determine whether they be good acquisitions or sites for development. in order to be successful drafting these, you have to be brutally honest and objective with the data. It's not uncommon for me to reject dozens of potential sites before approving a site that has potential. And I will only work with partners and colleagues who have dedicated their careers to this type of honesty and transparency. That includes the 2 Texas real estate brokers who offered to sponsor me. They've been brokers for 20 years each, and neither has had one complaint or infraction. So I respectfully ask the Commission to please adopt the administrative judge's proposed final decision and my probationary license. Thank you again for letting me speak.
Thank you for your time. At this time, is there a staff attorney that would like to speak on this case?
Mike Malloy, staff attorney. Since I only got this information yesterday or early this morning, I'm going to defer a lot of my questions to Sandy, but basically, Sandy Zimmerman handled the case, and essentially, you know, this is an applicant. He defrauded investors. It's a very serious felony. We'll point out there are differences between the cases, the Smith case that he pointed out. In the Smith case, there was restitution, just like there is in this one. The restitution was fully paid in the Smith case. In this case, there was $400,000 restitution. There's still 300 and some odd thousand still remaining. I understand he is paying on his payment plan, but that is something to take into account. Our other concerns were outlined in our findings, our exceptions, and I'm going to turn over the questions, if any, to Ms. Zimmerman. So, okay.
I'd like to make one more statement. You know, having discussed this with my director, Mr. Moore, we accept that this is a well-written opinion and that there are many arguments for approving this, and we certainly leave this up to the commission. We did have concerns. We had concerns that it be well within the consideration that there were extensive limitations on Mr. Kaplan's personal finances that, in comparison to a fiduciary duty, we wanted to make sure that those were considered as they were not in the findings of fact in the PFD, and I felt it was a duty to point those out in as they were not in the findings of fact. We felt that the restitution issue was very important to point out. And at that, I will open this for the questions, and I just wanted to make that clear.
Thank you very much. We appreciate that. Do any commissioners have any questions for Ms. Zimmerman or for our staff attorneys?
I just have one question, maybe for the staff attorney. The restitution is a large amount. It's my understanding there's other parties also involved in repaying that restitution. Is that correct?
There is. The only evidence that was presented at hearing was the restitution being paid by Mr. Kaplan.
And it's being paid timely.
Exactly. There was plenty of evidence that his was being paid in a timely manner, but it certainly was jointly and severally owed.
Okay.
Anybody else? Commissioner Williams, did you have a question? Or? No? Okay. Mr. Collins, do you have anything else you'd like to?
Yes, Your Honor, just briefly. As far as Mr. Kaplan's role in the transaction, in the opinion, I think it's important to look at page 16, paragraph 2. Let me see.
I'm with you where it says that his conduct was limited to, I probably should say approximately instead of appropriately, 9 months between January and September 2010. criminal
Right.
conduct was restricted to his failure to immediately disclose, et
Right,
cetera.
right.
Yes, sir, we're familiar with that.
Yes, so I just would have you take notice of that, and that basically the judge pretty much determined that Mr. Kaplan's criminal conduct was limited to approximately 9 months between January and September 2010. During this time, Mr. Kaplan testified he struggled between allegiance to his father and his duty to UBS investors. He appreciates he made the wrong choice. There is no evidence that Mr. Kaplan participated in decisions to mismanage and commingle UBS finances. His criminal conduct was restricted to his failure to immediately disclose to UBS investors and potential investors that his father had been diverting and commingling funds. I just think that's important to make note of.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Before you sit down, does any commissioners have any questions for Mr. Collins?
No.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
At this time, I'll entertain a motion.
Commissioner Turner, I would move the commission adopt the PFD with the following changes. On the 6th paragraph, it's mentioned it is further ordered that the license issued, if timely renewed, remain on probationary status until 8/12 of 21, or the date of applicant's community supervision ends, whichever is later, subject to the following terms and conditions. Make that one change from January 6 to 8/12 of 21, and whichever ends latter will be the date, whether it's community supervision and or the 2 years.
Second.
Commissioner, and that is to adopt the PFD as written with
those changes.
stipulations?
Yes, ma'am.
And then, do you have any additional restrictions that you want on the license?
The restrictions will, my motion, the restrictions would follow the PFD as far as his terms and conditions of supervision and trust funds. Is that?
There were 2 proposed orders. One was presented by staff and one was presented by the applicant, and there were 5 restrictions in the order from staff and 8 restrictions in the order from the applicant.
Okay, so
So you'll just need to read those restrictions into the record that you want to be imposed.
Okay. All right, I will add into this. Applicant must comply with Chapter 1101, Texas Occupations Code, with the rules of the commission. 2, applicant must fully cooperate with the community supervision, with the commission standards and enforcement service division in its investigation to any and all complaints against applicant. Not later than the 14th day after the date of any new sponsorship or change in sponsorship, applicant must submit to the commission standards and enforcement division a written verification from any new sponsoring broker that the new sponsoring broker has received a copy of this order and is aware of the applicant's probationary status, sales agent license, and the terms of this order. A violation of this term automatically revokes the applicant's probationary real estate sales agent license effective the 15th day after the date of sponsorship change. Number 4, applicant must comply with all terms and conditions of the community supervision imposed by applicant by the federal court in case number 15CR0651 CAB. A violation of the terms and condition automatically revokes the applicant's probationary real estate license effective on the date of violation, and no later than the 14th day after the date of a violation or change, applicant must provide complete information to the Commission Standards and Enforcement Services Division about any violation or change in the terms or concerns of the community supervision ordered by the federal court, case number 15CR0651 CAB. A violation of this term automatically revokes the applicant's probationary real estate license effective the 15th day after the date of violation or change in court order terms and conditions of community supervision. Is that?
That's it. I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, any further discussion? All those in favor of adopting the PFD as written with the restrictions that were provided by our chair in the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to agenda item 13B, SOA docket number 329190711, David C. Bates versus TREC.
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, this agenda item in the matter of Mr. Bates versus TREC involves an application for a sales agent license. The proposal for decision before you today, the administrative law judge recommends a denial based on the applicant's criminal history and the applicant's failure to fully disclose that criminal history during the application process. No exceptions were filed, and I believe Mr. Bates is here in the audience.
Mr. Bates, are you here?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Would you like to speak today? You don't have to.
Yes.
Okay. Same deal. I'm going to give you 5 minutes, okay? It's going to go by faster than you think, so.
I believe it.
Okay.
I believe it. Good afternoon, Commission. I do appreciate you guys for allowing me to take the time. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
I do realize that in the application, I did fail to disclose some details. In the application process, I did not do my due diligence, and the details that I did disclose were what I felt in reference to obtaining a license, not to make an excuse. I'm not going to paint a picture of me being perfect. I've definitely made mistakes and have lived overseas for the past couple of years. When I came back into the country, I did pursue my real estate license after having learned about what I could build, being an American and obviously building a business and obtaining that financial freedom. Initially, when I passed my real estate test, let me backtrack. Initially, I did not pass my real estate test, and then I ended up going to the Champion School of Real Estate, where I did actually end up passing it. I just wanted to speak to the Commission and let you know that I am competent, I am fit, and I am capable of acting as a responsible real estate agent. I do have two brokers, Drew Colon of Modtown Realty and Matt Scobie, who have agreed to sponsor me upon obtaining my real estate license. I do understand my history and my past, and I have learned from my past. I've learned to be more detail-oriented and more diligent and transparent as well with all of my actions. I'm not here to argue any of my past, and I do hold myself accountable for my actions. I'm just here to plead with the Commission to grant me the opportunity not afforded to many, even if probationary. I know that wasn't given as an exception when I did come previously with my attorney. I have presented many characters of reference, even though those character reference letters did not state my history, my criminal history. I'm just humbly asking the board to grant me at least a probationary license. And I just do not want to wait another 2 years to have to go through the application process and the testing. And I would like to be able to practice in the state of Texas.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you. And commissioners, any commissioners have any questions for Mr. Bates?
Okay. I have one.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Bates, we saw a lot of things that you did in your past. How old were you at that time?
How old was I?
Yeah.
I'm now 35. I would say that was in between the ages of 21 to about 27.
Okay.
In that time, I was bartending and around quite a bit of negatively influential people that I've definitely learned to change my surroundings.
What are you doing for work right now?
I currently temp at Cushman & Wakefield for BG Staffing. I've been a property admin now for about 8 months. So I've temped with JLL, CBRE, Cushman & Wakefield. As a matter of fact, I had a phone interview this morning with Cushman for real estate asset management.
Anybody else have any questions right now? Okay. I'll give you the opportunity to respond to our staff if you'd like to.
Sure, thank you.
Thank you for your time. Thank you for coming. Is there a staff attorney that'd like to speak on the matter?
Mike Malloy, staff attorney again. I'm going to talk about a couple brief points, and then Ken Herring was the attorney that handled the matter, so he'll be able to answer more detailed questions. This applicant has extensive criminal history. Which most disconcerting it is, and this opinion was written very well, thought by the judge. There's the applicant, Mr. Bates, talked about him not filling in his information on his application. The judge did point out that there was lots of stuff he failed to point out. One specific thing that was not brought up was pending criminal complaints. That's obvious. And his criminal history for our looks at it goes from 19 to 32, so that's a pretty long period of criminal history in our opinion. When you file for an application, that's your first impression to the commission, and if you're that dishonest and not able to fill out everything, because we're explicit in our application process to give the whole criminal background, and someone doesn't do that with this extensive criminal history, with his excuses that he gave to the judge, it just doesn't match up, and we wish to adopt the proposal decision from the judge. And I'll defer any questions to Mr. Herring.
Thank you. Mr. Herring? You have anything further to?
I would just point out that we have not been presented today with any grounds under Government Code 2001-058E to make a change in the PFD.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions for our staff attorneys? Okay. Mr. Bates, is there anything else you'd like to say at this time?
Again, I want to state that I do understand the history that has been presented to you. I know you are all well versed in this case. I'm not here to make excuses. I didn't do my due diligence when I filled out the application. I just knew that was something that I wanted to pursue, and I learned that I need to pay attention to detail. Regardless of the decision that's held today, I'm still going to pursue my real estate license for my future.
Any questions? Any more questions? All right. So at this time, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make that. Although, Mr. Bates, I commend you for coming and changing the environment that you're in. I would really encourage you to continue to move forward, but at this time, I have to move that the commission adopt the PDF as written.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? I'd echo what Mr. Williams said. I think this was a tough decision for everybody up here, but it's tantamount. I want anybody who's watching our public meeting to know now that it's so very important to disclose your full criminal history when you're applying for a license with this agency. And when you don't, as our staff attorney pointed out, that's your first impression. And you really start with a step behind when you do that. So I have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All those in favor of adopting the PFD as written, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries. We're going to move on to agenda item 13C, so a docket 329191489, TREC versus Myra Hovel.
Good afternoon, Commissioners and Mr. Chair. This item before you is consideration regarding a proposal for decision in the matter of the Texas Real Estate Commission versus Myra Jovel. In the proposal for decision before you, the ALJ recommends an administrative penalty be imposed in the amount of $6,750, as well as a 6-month suspension of the license. I will also note that currently Ms. Jovel's license is expired. It expired on July 31st of 2018.
Okay, we have staff attorney ready to speak on this case.
This was a substantive case. We don't get these very often, but basically, this one dealt with an agent who listed a property without authority, and her broker didn't even know about it either. It was, $3 million listing, and she didn't keep her broker in the loop. I was the expert witness for this case, so I can probably field most questions if anyone has it. The judge knew the case and understood the facts and the seriousness of it, and that's why we got the result we did, I think.
Okay. Is anyone here on behalf of the licensee or Ms. Jovel? I'm not sure how to pronounce
Jovel.
that. Jovel, is Ms. Jovel, are you here? Okay, anybody have any questions for our staff attorney? Okay, at this time, I'll entertain a motion.
I move that we adopt the proposal for decision as written, and if respondent reinstates her expired real estate license, to suspend respondent's license for 6 months from the date of reinstatement or until the administrative penalty is paid, whichever is longer.
I have a motion. Do I have a second? I have a second. Any further discussion? All right. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to SOA agenda item 13D, SOA docket number 329192748, Lisa Marie Holly versus TREC.
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, before you in this agenda item is a proposal for decision in the matter of Lisa Marie Holly versus TREC. Ms. Holly applied for a sales agent license, and staff recommended the denial based on an outstanding civil judgment against the applicant that the applicant has failed to pay, and for providing misleading statements in the application. In the proposal for decision, the ALJ recommends denial of the application. No exceptions were filed in this matter.
All right, is Ms. Holly or anyone on behalf of Ms. Holly here today? All right, we have the staff attorney prepared to speak on this matter.
So, yes, it was an applicant, and it was a multi-million-dollar judgment. It dealt with her, she was a doctor, and dealt with fraud, her defrauding people, saying she was providing services and getting paid for them, even though she wasn't doing them. So we'd recommend that the commission adopt the PFD from the judge. So, thank you.
Do you have any questions for staff? All right, I'll entertain a motion.
I would move that we would adopt the proposal as written.
I have a motion from Commissioner Wilkinson. Do I have a second?
Second.
And any further discussion? All right, all those in favor of the motion to adopt the proposal for decision as written, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. I'm going to move on to agenda item 14, Recovery Fund, specifically 14A, GLM Enterprises versus One Source Property Management, Inc. et al.
Agenda item 14A is a recovery fund case. The plaintiffs, GLM Enterprises LLC, are seeking reimbursement and payment of a judgment they received against One Source Property Management, Inc. et al. And it's before you today for possible settlement.
Do I have a motion on?
Move that the commission authorize settlement payment of $8,340 in actual damage, plus interest, court costs, and reasonable attorney's fees, pending receipt of a writ of execution returned nulla bona for Vanessa Marie Baumann.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All right, all those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Agenda item 14B, Axelrod and Axelrod versus Babier.
This matter is before the commission today as a recovery fund claim. The plaintiffs, Alex Axelrod and Pauline Axelrod, are seeking reimbursement from the Real Estate Recovery Trust account for a judgment received against Thomas Babier with actual damages of $114,452. The matter is before you today for possible settlement.
Do I have a motion on agenda item 14B?
I would move that we authorize settlement payment of $100,000, the maximum amount allowed by law, split as follows: $39,586.03 to Alex Axelrod and $60,413.97 to Pauline Axelrod.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Agenda item 14C, Recovery Fund 19016, Galindo versus Wiggins.
This matter is before the commission today. It's a claim for payment from the Real Estate Recovery Trust account. Ms. Galindo, the plaintiff in this matter, received a judgment against the license holder Edgar P. Wiggins and is seeking payment from the Recovery Fund. It's before you today for possible settlement.
Do I have a motion on agenda item 14C?
Yes. Move that we authorize payment of $2,085 in actual damages plus interest and court costs.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. All right. Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Agenda item 15 is rules for emergency adoption. You want to carry on?
Certainly, Mr. Chair. Before you in agenda item 15 are emergency amendments to implement legislative changes enacted in Senate Bill 37. This legislation eliminated the consideration of student loan defaults when determining whether to grant a license. The legislation took immediate effect upon signing by the governor, and the proposed amendments would be to 22 TAC 535.91 and 535.403 to remove the language that relates to student loan defaults in those sections. Staff is recommending that the commission authorize staff on behalf of the commission to submit for adoption on an emergency basis amendments to 535.91 and 535.403 as presented to the Texas Register, along with any technical, non-substantive changes required for adoption with an effective date of with an effective date of the date of publication, since those were effective immediately upon signing by the governor.
I move that the commission approve staff's recommendation.
Have a motion? Second. Got a second? Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Agenda item 16.
This agenda item also includes the possible adoption of emergency amendments to implement legislative changes enacted in Senate Bill 624 that were effective or will become effective on September 1st for complaints filed on or after that date. The amendments are proposed to Rule 535.191 and Rule 535.219. The staff recommendation is to authorize staff on behalf of the commission to submit for adoption on an emergency basis amendments to these two rules as presented to the Texas Register, along with any technical or non-substantive changes required for adoption with an effective date of September 1st, 2019 to coincide with the effective date of Senate Bill 624.
Move that the commission approve our staff's recommendations.
Motion second. Have a second. All in discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Worman. Agenda item 17, these are rules for possible adoption that were proposed at the last meeting, so this will be for adoption.
Correct. So agenda item 17 contains proposed amendments to section 531.3, which were published in the May 24th, 2019 issue of the Texas Register. The amendments clarify the definition of competency to conform with recent changes to 535.2 regarding broker responsibility, which requires brokers to ensure their sponsored agents have geographic and property type competence. Staff recommends that the Commission authorize staff on behalf of the Commission to submit for adoption amendments to 531.3 as published to the Texas Register, along with any technical or non-substantive changes required for adoption.
Mr. Chair, I move that the commission approve staff's recommendation.
Second. Got a motion and a second. Any discussion?
I'm going to discuss that this is going to be very, very hard to police.
Any further discussion? I don't think we need to vote on that, but I agree with you, okay? All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Agenda item 18.
This is a proposed amendment to Chapter 535.43, which was published in the May 24, 2019 issue of the Texas Register. The amendment extends the existence of the Education Standards Advisory Committee to 2025 to mirror the next sunset review of the Commission. Staff recommends that the Commission authorize staff on behalf of the Commission to submit the adoption amendments to Chapter 535.43 as published to the Texas Register, along with any technical or non-substantive changes required for adoption.
Move that we approve the staff's recommendation.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve staff's recommendations. Any discussion?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Agenda 19.
Agenda item 19 contains proposed amendments to 535.61, which was published in the May 24th, 2019 issue of the Texas Register. The amendments add clarifying terms or timeframes for greater understanding and compliance. The Education Standards Advisory Commission reviewed these rules and brought them forward for your recommendation, or they recommended these rules in May. The staff recommendation is for the Commission to authorize staff to submit for adoption amendments to 535.61 as published to the Texas Register, along with any technical or non-substantive changes required for adoption.
Move that the commission approve staff's recommendation.
Second.
We've got a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Agenda item number 20.
Agenda item 20 contains proposed amendments to 535.65 and 535.75, which were published in the May 24th, 2019 issue of the Texas Register. The amendments to 535.65 ensures that the consumers can verify the most current passage rate figures and related information for any and all providers. In addition, 535.65 and .75 are updated to reflect the Sunset Advisory Commission report directive that instructors of courses be approved by providers not licensed by the Commission, but of course the Commission retains the ability to set those qualifications and standards. Staff recommends that the Commission authorize staff to submit for adoption amendments to 535.65 and 535.75 as published to the Texas Register, along with any technical or non-substantive changes as required for adoption.
Move that the commission approve staff's recommendation.
A second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Agenda item number 21.
Agenda item 21 contains proposed amendments to 535.63 and 535.74, which were published in the May 24th, 2019 issue of the Texas Register. These amendments are also in direct response to the Sunset Advisory Commission report and are a continuation of the elimination of TREC's authority to approve real estate and instructors in both qualifying courses and CE. Staff recommends that the Commission authorize staff to submit for adoption these amendments to 535.63 and 535.74, along with any technical or non-substantive changes required for adoption.
Move that the commission approve staff's recommendation.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. I will let you know we do have public comment on agenda item 22 when you finish presenting.
Fantastic. Okay, agenda item 22 contains proposed amendments to 535.148, which were published in the May 24th, 2019 issue of the Texas Register. These amendments provide clarity about consumer protection issues when paying or receiving funds to or from other settlement service providers. We did receive 2 written comments when the amendments were published in the Texas Register. Each of these comments addressed the need for change to current practices, and neither requested changes to the proposed rule. As such, staff is not recommending any changes based on those comments. Staff recommends that the Commission authorize staff to submit for adoption 535.148 as published to the Texas Register, along with any technical or non-substantive changes required for adoption.
Okay. Lee Warren would like to speak.
Excuse me. This item is commonly referred to as the pay-to-play rule. Many brokerages, in an effort to generate revenue streams for their offices, have engaged in this practice. The problem with this is the effect that it has on the consumer. With these programs, service providers are required to pay a fee, whether it be monthly or annually, in order to be on a list of preferred vendors within that brokerage. The service provider is promised that the agents within that office will only be referring service providers that participate in that program. Service providers are also informed that if they do not participate in these programs, that they will no longer be allowed to display any materials in that brokerage's office or even enter that office with the intent to promote their service in any way. Brokerages that have started these programs are disposing of any marketing items that non-participating service providers have in their buildings, or they are called upon to come out to that office to physically remove them. The cost for these programs ranges from a few $100s up to the tens of thousands of dollars per year. Many of these programs limit the number of service providers within any particular industry. As a result, the consumer was left with only the choices that are from paying service providers. In most cases, the consumer is not made aware that the only reason the agent is referring a particular service provider is because that provider has paid a fee. These providers are not pre-qualified to determine the quality of work they provide. The qualification for becoming one of these preferred vendors is simply if they pay the required fees to the brokerage on an ongoing basis. By stating that agents will only be allowed to refer service providers that are a part of these programs, the brokers may also be crossing a line between the independent contractor relationship to more of an employee-employer relationship. Many service providers, including lenders, home warranty companies, title companies, and others, have the same concerns with these types of programs. However, many of them are reluctant to speak publicly on this issue for fear of retribution from the brokerages that do not currently participate in this practice. I myself have been threatened by multiple brokers that if I pursue this rule change and speak publicly regarding its implementation, that I will no longer ever receive referrals from anyone within their brokerage again in an effort to directly impact my business accordingly. However, in spite of this, I feel strongly that it is in the best interest of the consumer and our industry as a whole that this needs to happen. These types of programs also limit the types of companies that can participate. Many service providers are sole proprietors and have small marketing budgets. These types of programs limit a consumer's choice to companies that are large enough to pay the dollar amounts that the brokerages are requiring. Some companies are having to cut budgets in other areas in order to be able to keep up with the larger companies to be a part of these programs, for fear that the company would be left behind. These cutbacks in other areas most often affect the consumer in the end. With pay-to-play programs for some service providers to participate, they will have to raise their cost to consumers in order to have the ability to be on somewhat of a level playing field. Now the consumer is paying a higher price for services by service providers that are only being referred to them because the brokerage was paid a fee. In the end, the consumer pays the consumer pays more for the service, their choices are limited to those that participate in the programs. The choices provided to the consumers are based solely on the service provider's ability to pay and not the quality of work, and the brokerages are profiting as a result. There's been a longstanding rule in the Inspector Act to prevent all service providers from participating in these types of programs in an effort to level the playing field for all service providers and to create an open and transparent free market for the consumer. However, currently, even though it is against the Inspector Act to participate in these types of preferred vendor programs, it is not against any rule for brokerages to solicit any and all service providers to generate these revenue streams at a cost to the consumer. Being a member of the Inspector Advisory Committee, I knew from the start of my tenure here that my first priority is to the consumer. There are times when tough choices must be made. There are times when I have to make a choice that I may not like as a business owner. There are times when the choices that I make will cost me more time and money. However, the choices that I make as a representative of this commission must be done with the consumer in mind. As a broker, my brokerage that has been in business for over a dozen years now, I realize that I too am limiting my options as a brokerage to generate this type of revenue in the future. I also realize that this is something that needs to be done. This rule has already existed in the Inspector Act for a number of years, and I believe it is about time that the same rule should be applied on the brokerage side as well. Currently, an educated consumer can file a complaint with the federal government about possible RESPA violations with these programs. However, most consumers do not know their rights on these issues and even less would go through the steps to file a complaint with the federal government. Implementing this rule would allow licensees and service providers to police ourselves to ensure that a level playing field is there for every hardworking service provider. It would keep the consumer from paying more than they should for services in which they receive, and it will also ensure that the referrals that they receive from their agent are due to relationships that have been built with time, experience, and quality of work, and not just because they're check cleared to pad a brokerage's bottom line. Thanks.
Thank you.
I previously stated the motion, or the staff recommendation. Do you want me to say that again?
Yes, please. Or do we need it? Are y'all ready to make a motion?
Move that the commission approve staff's recommendation.
Second. I have a motion and a second. Discussion. I'd like.
I listened in on the inspection meeting, and you all had quite a dialogue on this, and appreciate your time. So it really is, it's a hard issue to combat. I've been in the business for a long, long time, and pay to play it's a tough one. It's a tough one for all of us.
I'd like to add some discussion, if I may, and maybe Mr. Warren might want to answer this. There are brokers that have a vendor list, and the people that are on this vendor list are scrubbed by that broker, and I am just presuming, maybe I shouldn't, that if they've scrubbed them, they're on their preferred vendor list, but inspectors are always referred, we always refer them, we have a list, but we refer them to TREC's website because someone might have got a license on Tuesday and we did our list on the Friday before. Reading this, if the broker's vendor list still meets the RESPA violation, still meets the RESPA guidelines, it would still meet these guidelines because normal promotional could be interpreted as advertising or whatever. So I look at this as more following the RESPA guidelines than anything else, bringing the inspectors in under that.
That's correct. The purpose behind this change in rule was beyond RESPA, but it definitely had RESPA in mind in terms of not wanting to go further than RESPA, but mirroring the intention of RESPA.
And as a broker, can I have a vendor list where they sign an agreement with me, and then if they run with scissors pointed out, I would still have the right to either restrict them from that list or add them to the list if I want. I mean, how is this going to affect brokers with vendors lists? Because, consumers, they value those lists. And I'm just wondering how far this goes to prevent the brokers from having a vendor list.
Well, it still allows brokers to offer advertising at market rates. And separately, you can have a vendor list. There are stipulations on what that might look like, but that could be simple recommendations that are not paid for, or it would be treated as promotional advertising, depending on the fact pattern, really.
And I agree, and we don't have a vendor list, but if we did and there was inspectors on it, I think they should certainly refer them to the website because you never have a full list because people are always coming in and out. Is that your understanding also?
Right, and the intent here is not just to look at it from the inspector side, it's for all service providers. I've received a lot of feedback from title companies, home warranty companies, stuff of that nature. There's a home warranty company in the Dallas area that is paying a brokerage approximately $50,000 annually to be the only home warranty company that is referred by that company, by that brokerage. And other warranty companies are not allowed to walk into that office, not allowed to talk to their agents, and their agents are not allowed to refer anybody other than this company. This is the kind of stuff that we're trying to prevent. We want an equal playing field for all service providers, title companies, lenders, everybody, so it's on the same playing field. And of those, some of those brokerages that have certain vendor lists, the vendor list in itself isn't the problem. The problem is if the consumer is given a list of approved vendors or whatnot, and the only reason that they're on that list is because they paid a fee. If the consumer doesn't know that, that's a problem. And that's another big part of what we're trying to knock out. If the service providers come in and proved over time and over experience that, hey, I provide a good quality service and my rates are reasonable and I treat your clients, just the way you want you as a brokerage to you treat your clients, be on the list, great. But if it's just because here's my check, I want to be part of that program and now put me on that list, that's where I think we run into a real big problem.
And I think we do a good job with the home warranty companies because there's a separate disclosure they must fill out as a broker on the contract if they receive any type of rebate or funds. Okay. And RESPA takes care of the disclosure on the other vendor list. Okay, all right.
The hope here also is that by making this a rule, the service providers and licensees can start policing themselves, and it's easier to go file a complaint with TREC and get that ball rolling rather than tell somebody you have to file a RESPA complaint and go through the federal process.
Okay. Any other discussion?
I'm one of those brokers that has a vendor list. We've had it since we merged with a company that had it in 1993. It has served us well. We have probably nine warranty companies on it. We have 50 inspectors on it. We don't rank them. If they want to pay a higher price than some other inspector on it, they have more advertising privileges. Are we going against the rules that you're trying to make? Because I'm not a rule breaker.
No, as long as you're paying they are paying market rates for that advertising, and you are being forthcoming. The problem really comes when there's what I would describe as a false ranking system. What the consumer believes is ranking based on quality is really based on pay scale. So we can talk further, but I believe that you're fine.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
No.
Motion carries.
Yes, sir. Agenda item 23 contains proposed amendments to 535.206, which were published in the May 24th, 2019 issue of the Texas Register. The amendments reinstates term limits for the Real Estate Inspector Committee members. It aligns term expiration dates with other advisory committees for the commission. It changes the meeting month in which officers are elected from February to January to better align with their meeting schedule, and updates the sunset date to match the new sunset date for the commission. Staff recommends that the commission authorize staff to submit for adoption amendments to 535.206 as published to the Texas Register, along with any technical or non-substantive changes required for adoption.
Got a motion? I got a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Agenda item 24.
Okay, agenda item 24 contains amendments to 535.209, .212, and 213. I discussed these earlier. These have been reproposed. And so the staff recommendation is for the commission to authorize staff to withdraw the proposed amendments to 535.209, 212, and 213 from the Texas Register.
Have a motion?
Move that the commission approve our staff's recommendation.
Second? Have a motion and a second. Any discussion? I did get a second. Reluctantly, I think. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Agenda item 25.
Okay, agenda item 25 is very similar. In May, new 535.212 and 213 were proposed, and the old were proposed for repeal. So this agenda item contains proposed repeals to 535.212 and 213, which were published in the May 24th, 2019 issue of the Texas Register. Staff recommends that the commission authorize staff to withdraw the proposed repeals to 535.212 and 535.213 from the Texas Register.
Move that the commission approve staff's recommendation.
Second.
Motion in 2 seconds. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Agenda item 26.
Agenda item 26 contains proposed amendments to 535.218, which were published in the May 24th, 2019 issue of the Texas Register. This was the last part of the inspector education package that was presented to you for proposal in May. While the other rules, because of the need for a transition period, have just been withdrawn and also reproposed, this rule can move forward to adoption should you so choose. The proposed amendment sets out the continuing education topics required for inspectors to renew their licenses. The proposed amendments also add minimum requirements for receiving continuing education credit for a ride-along inspection course. And lastly, the proposed amendment expands the ability for an inspector to receive 4 hours per license period of continuing education by attending a Texas Real Estate Inspector Committee meeting. Currently, the rule reads that it's only at the February meeting. I will draw your attention to page 257, which is the actual proposed rule. At the last Inspector Committee meeting, there was a requested change that is less onerous than what was before you in May, and therefore can move forward for adoption. But it did not, what they requested that we strike did not get into your meeting materials in the correct way. So I wanted to point you to, the easiest way to say it is the text just above subpart B. It's about 3/4 down the first column of 535.218. It's subpart A, 1, big A, 8. Other approved courses as they relate to real estate inspections. And then we will strike the remainder of the text until B. That makes the course requirements less onerous, more flexible. So,
Might I ask, I hope I'm not out of order. Mr. Warren, do you have any input on this?
Again, as she said, we just wanted to make it more flexible. So we had requested that from the comma, and then which shall include, that it doesn't just limit it to those 3 areas, that we open it and let that be up to TREC staff to determine whether those courses would be relatable to real estate inspections or not. Absolutely. Sir, thank you.
I have a question. So he says, Mr. Warren says it, so it'll be up to TREC staff. We're striking qualifying course. So it's just going to read 24 hours in the following subjects. And there are 7 specific subjects listed.
That will all remain. Look at the highlighted portion, what is in blue on the screen. That is what will be struck.
Right, I get it. So
Okay.
by striking that, you have 7 specific topics, 24 hours in the following subjects: foundations, framing, etc., and then just other approved courses as they relate to real estate inspections.
That's right.
So we'll be, as a body, approving these other courses, because you render the previous recitation of specific topics useless, superfluous, everything, if you're just other approved
And
courses
other
as they relate to lawn mowing, whatever. I mean, who's approving and what's the process?
That's part of the education provider approval process to determine whether or not something would be appropriate for continuing education under this category.
In your opinion, do we have appropriate measures in place to make sure that whatever falls into this other approved courses will be on a topic that will be useful to the consumer for our inspectors to get CE credit for?
I do. I have great confidence in that. We've discussed that in other areas for real estate sales agents and brokers, what would be appropriate. We had a request for there to be more classes on security or personal safety, and that was determined you can't do that unless it's very narrow in scope and could be helpful, like for the consumer. So I believe the education staff is very competent to make those judgments.
Thank you. And Mr. Warren, I don't mean to be pessimistic. You understand it's our job up here to make sure that we're, especially as a public member, it's my job to make sure that we have substantive continuing education and licensing requirements, in my opinion. Thank you, Joseph.
One other question, if you don't mind. My understanding is our inspector committee meetings can have lively discussion. Is that worthy of 4 hours of continuing education just to attend a meeting?
Very good question. I leave that to the policymakers to decide. The wording of the rule currently is that they can receive continuing education if they attend the February meeting in its entirety. And this would broaden it to any meeting.
That's our meeting.
No, the February inspector meeting. And so this broadens it to any inspector meeting. I do think that it's, well, as being new in this role, I find them to be very educational in terms of learning the nuances of the practice of inspection.
Did you have a comment?
We also have a public comment. So.
I was just say it's up to 4 hours. So if the meeting doesn't last 4 hours, they don't get all that, and it's up to
3.5 hours or
right, and it's up to 4 hours per licensure period, per renewal period. So they could, even if they attend all the meetings or whatnot, the max they could receive is 4. Or if they just go to one full commission meeting or full inspector committee meeting, they receive up to 4 hours, but not exceeding that for that in one license period.
I am absolutely 100% sure you run a fabulous meeting.
We try to keep it pretty tight.
However, is that worthy of, let's say it's a 4-hour meeting, 4 hours of CE?
I believe so, and the biggest reason for that is because we want our inspectors to engage in the process. We want them to be involved, not just to go get their license and the only thing they get from TREC is what they get online or when they make a phone call. We want them to know that there is a body in place and the process is in place in how those rules are proposed and put into place that they have to abide by. And we want inspectors to feel that they are a part of the process, to understand it, to get them involved, and to know and be able to convey to consumers and their other colleagues exactly what the process is, to get people more active in the process.
We also have Roy Carter with Champion School of Real Estate that would like to make a comment.
Hello, Commissioners. My name is Roy Carter, and I am the Director of Inspector Education for Champion School of Real Estate. And I just wanted to address that other approved real estate courses, because the way it stands now, that list that we have covers the what we call the core courses, but then when we get into the optional systems, which has landscape irrigation, pools, spas, septic systems, and all of those things, that's what would be pulled up under those other related courses. All right? So I just wanted to bring some more information to that particular subject matter to kind of give an idea of what those kind of courses would be, and as they're approved currently. So.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Just an observation, a technical observation. So I know it's in the motion that we could fix this later, but it says Roman numeral 6, Roman numeral 7, Roman numeral 8, Roman numeral 7, Roman numeral 8.
You don't like that?
No. No, it's far too duplicative of 7s and 8s.
Very confusing.
There's always somebody.
So,
Would you like a motion?
certainly.
Move that the commission approve the staff's recommendation.
Second, provided the grammatical situation numbering is fixed.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion?
Should it say up to ability for an inspector to receive up to 4 hours per license period? So they don't get credit for 4 hours if they only went to a 2-hour meeting?
Currently, it reads, an inspector license in Texas may receive up to 4 hours of continuing education. Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Agenda item 27.
Okay, agenda item 27 contains the proposed amendments to 535.220, which were published in the May 24th, 2019 issue of the Texas Register. These amendments add additional settlement providers to the list of those prohibited from paying or receiving valuable consideration to an inspector in connection with the real estate transaction. This rule has been in place for quite some time. The rule that was just presented, 535.148, the other pay-to-play rule, was significantly modified when proposed in May. Some of those changes affected how this rule, 220, was written. And so these are some conforming changes so that the two rules interact well together and mirror each other. So with that in mind, staff recommends that the commission authorize staff to submit for adoption amendments to 535.220 as published to the Texas Register, along with any technical or non-substantive changes required for adoption.
Have a motion?
Move that the commission approve staff's recommendation.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Agenda item 28.
Okay, this is the last one for me. Agenda item 28 contains proposed amendments to 535.222, which were published in the May 24th, 2019 issue of Texas Register. These amendments clarify that the inspector does not have to deliver the report, an inspection report, until after receipt of payment for that report, and it reduces the delivery time after payment from 3 days down to 2. Staff recommends that the commission authorize staff to submit for adoption amendments to 535.222 as published to the Texas Register, along with any technical or non-substantive changes required for adoption.
I move that the commission approve staff's recommendation.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. We will move to agenda item 39. Priscilla Fipo, Staff and Support Services, discussing the state auditor's report.
Good afternoon. So I will not go through the entire report. I will go through a few highlights, and if you have questions, I'll be prepared to answer them. Statute requires all self-directed semi-independent agencies to undergo an audit and report on that. Periodically, the state auditor's office does that for all the SDSI agencies. We budget for it. We're prepared for it. This is the 4th audit with SAO at an SDSI agency that I've been through. It was a good audit. They had a few things that were good recommendations for us to be aware of. The audit covered financial transactions and information systems. And I'm going to make sure I give you guys enough time to get through it. I see pages turning. And so the page that I'll actually start on is page 425. And that shows you just a summary of all of the findings that they had and the recommendations. I will say that the SAO staff was very thorough and professional. They looked at hundreds, maybe even thousands of transactions. They met in dozens of meetings, and we explained processes. I think they were very sharp. They did a good job of going through things. The findings within this report are what in audit speak is considered immaterial, which means they're benign. They're basically recommendations for improvements. The 2 that had to do with financial transactions were less than 1%. In fact, 0.95% was the one of administrative penalties being misaligned or miscoded to the inspectors instead of to the regular real estate recovery fund. At the end of the year, calendar year, they sweep everything over $600,000 anyway, so that's really considered, I would consider that a low risk. SDSI agencies are unique in that revenue is more important than other agencies, and that's one reason that they review it. That's also one reason it takes them a while to get up to speed on that. One of their recommendations is that the annual financial report have the accruals put into the September instead of into August. It's simply a matter of consistency. We've done it the same way. We've been audited on it before. They've never made any issue of it. This time they did, so we said, okay, that's what we'll do next time. Again, that was an immaterial reporting. They did have IT processes with the highest area of risk. They did show security vulnerability, one of them in which, for an accounting standpoint, you should have separation of duties. You cannot approve and release a document and also be able to enter a document. We didn't even know that. We actually disputed with that in a meeting, pulled it up, realized that they were correct, and so we made that change right on the spot. So all the changes, all of the recommendations that they have made and brought to our attention, we have made changes to. Anything else, we are updated procedures. We really appreciated the time that they put into it and giving us feedback, particularly on performance measures and on suggestions for improving processes. And I really would like to commend my staff. They spent hundreds of hours combined in the accounting staff and lots of time. And one thing that I just wanted to point out is on page 428, in the little box, they have a little sign that says, we have 230 separate fee codes. And when they looked at how our staff allocates revenue that comes in and it puts those in the right little category and the manual process we have to do, they said they were just, I don't know if they used the word amazed, but at least impressed that they found so few errors. In fact, the only things that you see in that report out of a $14 million budget, $13 million revenue, that they found 2 things that were so minor and less than, as I said, 1%. So pretty good. Good work on my staff's part. I want to commend them.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Any questions? No. Okay, agenda item 42. Jennifer on Legal 1, Legal 2.
All right, so I'm here before you to represent Agenda Item 42, Jennifer Wheeler, Director of Education and Examination Services. Agenda Item 42 is discussion and possible action to approve the 2020-2021 Legal Update 1 and 2 course materials. These materials were sent to you under separate cover and are before you today for your approval. Staff recommends approval of the Legal Update 1 and 2 course material as presented with any technical or non-substantive changes.
Do you have a motion?
Motion that we approve, is that correct? With discussion, hopefully.
Second?
Second.
All right, any discussion?
Yes. Let's discuss the process.
Sure.
What's next?
What happens next?
Yeah.
Well, we're developing a PowerPoint that will coincide with this, but that doesn't require commission approval. These are the materials that do require your approval. We've already got the Texas A&M Real Estate Research Center scheduled for the instructor trainings that any instructors who will be teaching this course are still required to become certified through that process. We take feedback from the instructors who attend those trainings. We consider them our subject matter experts, essentially. And so based on some of their comments and that experience, they may recommend revisions or edits to the course materials, and we'll take those into consideration. Then the course itself is available for our education providers to start developing, especially those that need to put it into an online or a distance education format. And then the course begins January 1st.
So thank you for the hard work, because I know the committee did a great job and good people on there that know what they're doing. And thank Avis and them for making it a little humorous as well along the way, because it's pretty good. But I just worry about the process. Being a practitioner is a little bit different than being legal. And so, I'm glad that y'all are going to be having some other eyes look at it.
And this is common. This is historically what we do for this course and in years past, and additionally the broker responsibility course. And in years past, we've gotten a lot of really good feedback from those instructor training events. And I do also want to acknowledge the working group that did participate on this project. And those individuals I'd like to name specifically: Carrie Lewis, Avis Wukosh, Lee York, Abby Lee, Cheryl Harford, Dawn Enoch Moore, and Lori Selecki. And we owe them a debt of gratitude for their voluntary commitment to work on this project.
Any other discussion?
I just want to encourage you to make the PowerPoint presentation as few words as possible. I look at a PowerPoint as a signboard, 7 words or less on each sign.
Absolutely, and that is our intent. Thank you.
Any other discussion? All right, all in favor?
Well, I don't think we have a motion.
We had a motion and a second.
Did we? Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. And congratulations. I read most of it last night on the plane, and yeah, it's very good information.
Good, thank you.
Okay, going back to reports, the executive director asked for some time later, so I'm going to go to him, and then we will go to agenda item 43, but Doug will finish his report from earlier.
Actually, Tony paid me to extend the meeting so that he can win a bet with Chelsea. Actually, that's not true. It's not true. That's just a little side thing that's going on. I did want to provide some information today. I'm just so pleased at the amount of work that was accomplished between the last meeting and this meeting, and all the work that was done here today by you, and then of course our staff will be very busy implementing all of your actions. September the 1st will mark my 10-year service anniversary at the agency. And when I was asked to lead the agency in August of 2009, I compiled a list of priorities and projects that the commissioners and the board members wanted to have completed, and they tasked me to accomplish under their guidance and coaching the staff and building a staff. And I'm very proud to say that each of the items on this agreed list have been accomplished, and so much more than that. So a brief recap might be in order. One goal was to enhance the professionalism of the agency by strengthening broker responsibility and improving education standards. Secondly, modernize our rules development process to minimize regulatory burdens while enhancing consumer protections. Modernizing the rule development process is something I think we have done we've made enormous strides on involving all of our stakeholders and going through a very methodical process to ensure that our rules are very well considered. Third, bringing the agency's technology forward from an era of older proprietary systems to a much more web-enabled, easily accessible, distributed service model that updates routinely as the technology is improved. Fourth, to upgrade the website and all of our other communication tools and systems to provide services that meet current customer expectations and standards of responsiveness. And I think probably the contact center is the epitome of that accomplishment. I was also asked to ensure that we gained, or to work toward gaining, self-directed semi-independent status to achieve control over the resources that the agency needs to thrive, while paying a fair share of overhead, but without subsidizing non-related state ventures. We accomplished that in 2011. To relocate the agency from a privately owned and rented, dilapidated facility in a challenging neighborhood into a state office building in the heart of the Capitol complex, with the potential for even co-development of a new facility as a possible. And lastly, to build the agency into an attractive workplace by creating a group of self-developing staff teams who are capable, proactive, and forward-looking, who interact regularly with their peer agencies across the nation while learning best practices and earning respect by demonstrating sound public policy making practices. All of these goals have been achieved, and we are very proud of the collaborative efforts of our great stakeholders and the professional associations, which have made all of these advances possible. This was not a one-person operation or even one entity operation. It took the cooperation of many to make this happen. This agency is now considered a leader in national regulatory matters. While there is still much great work to do to implement the latest policy initiatives, we have also much to be grateful for and much to celebrate. You can count on your staff team to continue to build on this tradition. Today I'm announcing my intention to retire at the end of March of 2020. It is only fair to provide a significant advance notice period when considering something as important as the executive leadership of an agency. This 6-month, a little over 6-month plus lead time will allow for a professional recruitment, research, and selection process, along with an overlap period of at least 3 months to ensure a seamless transition to new leadership. It has been a tremendous honor and a distinct privilege to lead this agency for the last decade. Thank you.
Doug, you mentioned moving the building, and I don't know how many people remember where the old building was on Camino
La Costa.
La Costa. Yeah, I forgot we'd actually moved. a lot of accomplishments. I mean, you can look at that website, and renewing a license and sponsoring a license and transferring a license is certainly better than having to mail it and wait to get it back in the mail. So, anybody? TJ?
Doug, I've been here for 6 years or so now as a commissioner. In my career, I worked in Governor Perry's General Counsel's office. I worked at the Attorney General's office representing various state agencies and state officials that were involved in litigation. I give that background to say that I've worked with a lot of agency officials, a lot of executive directors, in a lot of different capacities. And you're as fine as I've seen. Thank you.
I'd like to make a comment. This actually is my first public board, and sat on several boards. And I tell you, you're at the top of the list. Top of the list. You know, we all hate to see you go. I mean, to be able to work with agents outside of these walls and people inside, everybody appreciate all of your hard work. But I tell you, this agency was glad to see you come. Because just like you said, you've taken this organization from here to there, and for you to still be the kind of person you are to work with the new replacement, that tells everyone about your character. We talk about teamwork. I come from a team-oriented background. You can't tell by my belly, but I came from a sports background. Don't change the way you look at the world. It's positive. So every move you make is going to be a positive move. I'm sure we're going to see you again. You're just retiring from this post. I'm pretty sure you'll be back up here again seeing us. So we thank you.
We appreciate everything that's been said, Doug. I'm sorry,
I just
Dawn.
wanted to say something. As a relatively new commissioner, first thing I looked at was your background, and thank you for all of that, too. You came with we got a prize, and we appreciate you.
Me and Doug have communicated on this, and I'm going to appoint the executive committee to start the search process, but I think it's imperative that the appraisal board also have a position on that. And so I'll probably reach out to the chairman to be part of that initial search progress, because I think it's imperative that they are part of it. And I just want to say thank you for the work you've done, and I think we put Tony in the lead for how long the meeting's going to be. So I appreciate all you do. Future meetings, we're scheduled to meet November 12th and 13th. That is a planning meeting and a regular commission meeting. Any future agenda items that the commissioners would like to see? I know we talked a couple of things on staff as far as some numbers and stuff. Anything else y'all would like to see on the agenda?
Scott, Mr. Chairman, I know that we're going to be in San Francisco for NAR meetings for our board of directors. So is there any thought about us maybe moving that meeting, workshop meeting, one day later? We have,
yes and no. We have talked about that, but that is something we will look at with the NAR meetings being in San Francisco. Anything else? I'm adjourning this meeting at 3:12 Central Time.